To the seating charge that we have arranged for each and every one of you. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, kindly we ask to please be seated according to the seating charge that we already arranged for this VIDA Executive Forum 2024. Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, kita akan segera memulai acara bagian acara dari VIDA Executive Summit 2024, yaitu VIDA Executive Forum 2024. Tapi sebelum memulai acara, kami mohon kesediaannya untuk bisa menempati bangku sesuai dengan nomor yang sudah tersedia untuk Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Sekali lagi, kindly we ask to please be seated according to the seating charge that we already arranged for this VIDA Executive Forum 2024. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start, could we hear a big round of applause for VIDA Executive Forum 2024? Thank you all so much for sticking around and excited for this session. And then we hope that you enjoyed the lunch that we serve for each and every one of you here. So once again, my name is Adi Kirana, and it's a privilege for me to keep everyone here company for VIDA Executive Summit 2024. We've reached to this session, VIDA Executive Forum 2024, that we promise you this session will be insightful, thought-provoking discussion also, and about the future of digital security and fraud prevention. We have a number of talk show or discussion, and then later on we also have a very interesting discussion about something end game. Okay, so please stick around until the end of this forum. We're about to proceed, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, I would like to invite Mr. Niki Luhur, founder and group CEO of VIDA, to give his welcoming remarks. Everyone, could you please put your hands together for Mr. Niki Luhur.
Selamat siang, Bapak-Bapak dan Ibu-Ibu yang saya hormati. Thank you for coming. Good afternoon. Mohon izinkan, I'll do a brief recap of the morning because I know many of you weren't there, but I'll keep it brief because I won't get in the way of the main event. So, VIDA, in this morning, we went through a deep dive into the world of fraud. We're looking into uncover what is it that puts businesses at risk? Not theory, actually going into the field. First-hand research. We recently conducted our first-hand research that helped us classify just that. In fact, some of the challenges, if you try and find fraud report in Indonesia, it's very difficult to find any information, surprisingly. So we invested a lot to try and understand where is this fraud coming from. Where is the fraud that poses the biggest financial burden on our businesses? And in Indonesia, we've categorized this into 4 main types of fraud, okay, that put our online transactions at risk. First, AI-generated fraud. The buzz around AI has been on top of everyone's mind for the last few years. OpenAI, Anthropic, Midjourney, DALL-E, all of these tools actually have caused a massive rise in deepfake fraud. deepfake fraud grew 1,540% from 2022 to 2023 in Asia Pacific. This includes things like photo and video deepfakes, voice cloning, and other types of impersonation attempts and attacks. In Indonesia, we have seen deepfake fraud increase by 1,550%. Ini bukan typo ya. There's no typo here. 1,550% rise between 2022 and 2023. 1 year. Okay. So you can see direct correlation with APAC, and if you look at the map, Indonesia is the one in red. This is not theory, this is data. Let's do more data. In Google DeepMind's June 2024 report, just 2 months ago, very recent report, okay, about generative AI misuse. The number one misuse of Gen AI is impersonation. Number one. Impersonation specifically for the purpose of fraud. So this is not something unique to Asia Pacific, Indonesia. This is global. This is because we are at the cusp of a massive technology change, which has some negative implications as well. Next, we have social engineering. The funny thing about social engineering is there's no engineering. You don't need to be an engineer to do social engineering. The only thing you need to be good at to do social engineering is being a good storyteller. And even then, Gen AI helps with that. It tells a very good story, a very convincing story. The scripts before, when you saw them, they weren't very good. Grammatical errors, you can spot it, something's wrong. This doesn't quite line up. You can tell it's probably someone from call center where they're not really, maybe, they're not a native speaker in that language. Now, all of us can speak any language in the world. Any language in the world. So it doesn't matter if that cyber gang is in Russia, if that cyber gang is on the other side of the world, they can speak bahasa Indonesia juga. Bisa loh. Because of the tools. So this engineering, social engineering, actually former CIA spy Peter Warmka had a good way of putting it. Social engineering is the art of human hacking. It's the art and science of convincing people to willingly give up their own data. They give it up. There's no gun to their head. There's no one forcing them to do this. They get manipulated. And in Indonesia, people try to social engineer or hack us almost every day. And the thing is, you don't have to believe me. Open up your phone. Check your SMS. Check your WhatsApp. Everyone has this. And there's tons of this. And those very dangerous things, of those dangerous APKs, surat undangan, foto, kwitansi, there's a whole bunch of these use cases. And this is the funny thing. This happens every day. These are just a few examples of people trying to get socially engineered. Phishing. We all know about phishing. Did you know there's this thing called smishing? Okay. And video phishing. These three are the most common ways in the way that social engineering fraud is committed. In Indonesia, 99% of all phishing attacks are social engineering related. They go hand in hand. Social engineering and phishing go hand in hand. And this isn't just true of Indonesia, this is all around the world. After that, the next thing that we see is all about account takeovers. Simply put, password reset. Enroll a new device. An account takeover is when a fraudster does one of those things, tells you a good story, and then you willingly give up your OTP, and they have access to either enroll a new device with access to your account, access to your bank, your credit card, your e-commerce, or in many cases, social media accounts. Once they have access, they can actually change everything. It's that easy, actually. And part of the problem is because we always think about, hey, you want to make it safe? 2FA. Right? But what's the first factor? The first factor, passwords. Let's take a look at passwords. We're talking a lot about passwords, but actually what's crazy today is that the number one password in the world is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And rank number 7, password. The password is password. Until today. Until today. It's still like that. And how many people use a unique password per account? How many people use the same password for multiple accounts? I do. I'll admit I do. Because here's the thing. If you use an 8-character password today, you know what's crazy? Does anyone know how long it takes to break an 8-character password today? 1 second. That's it. 1 second. So we have this other side. And then all of the social engineering attacks that happen. So why do you think all of our banking apps have this message? Hati-hati, waspada. Does it work? Let's be honest. We've been sending these kinds of alerts and warnings for years. Account takeover still happens. Social engineering still happens. That's the reality. In 2023, account takeover fraud globally increased. Increased, even with all of those messages, by 150%. Again, it's just good storytelling. And finally, identity theft and document signature forgery. Identity theft has been an issue for thousands of years, actually. Long time. But as billions of people go online, this type of fraud happens faster, at larger scale, and is easier to commit. Document signature forgery leads to unfortunate consequences. We've actually had situations that we highlighted this morning about real case studies in the media, in the news, the Indonesia, of people who are bound to contracts, bound to loans, that they had no idea. They never signed up for that loan. They never signed up. And then you have this difficulty now. Person is being held accountable for something they didn't do, and then you have a difficult situation between the financial institution and that potential victim. What do you do? Between 2022 and 2023, identity theft and document forgery fraud globally increased by 20%. So here you are. The 4 biggest threats to the safety of digital transactions today. A few other interesting things came out of our research. Number 1, 100% of businesses are concerned about the rise of deepfakes and AI-generated fraud. It's pretty hard to get people to agree 100% on anything. On anything. You know? And this is something there is unanimous agreement. 100%. Every single person we interviewed, no exception. Next is 46% of businesses are not familiar with deepfakes or AI-generated fraud. So you're scared of it, know it's a problem, but actually have no idea what to do. Next, that is 97% of businesses have been targeted by social engineering attacks in the past year. Pretty much everyone in this room. Everyone. I will be surprised if somebody hasn't. 44% of businesses, 44, have experienced financial losses due to social engineering attacks this year. These are not small statistics. This is something concrete, a huge problem that we face here today. So the white paper is actually on your tables. You'll see a QR code. You can scan the QR code. We have a detailed white paper there to be able to access this and perhaps help share some awareness and some urgency of why we believe this needs to change. And this is exactly why VIDA is dedicated to building solutions to keep all of our businesses and our customers protected from these types of risks. We understand these types of threats, and that's why we also announced how VIDA solutions are designed to fight AI-generated fraud. We talked about identity verification, where VIDA introduced Smart Liveness, which covers not just face, because that's everyone what thinks about liveness, but also document. So at least it's another layer. You have to fake the KTP too. As well as income verification. So we work with BPJS, being able to validate the data on record. So you have to go and fake the BPJS database, which is difficult to do. So with all of these layers, we can improve the onboarding, the credit underwriting process to make sure that things stay safe. Then we talked about how user authentication keeps us safe from social engineering and account takeovers. Basically two things. VIDA phone token, simply put, trusted device. Remember that checkbox when you buy a new phone and it says, do you want to trust this device? Check yes. Same thing. Same thing. We just give you that same level of security that Google, Apple, Microsoft have and empower your apps with the same thing. The second thing is the face token. Rather than making it complicated, when you KYC a user and you onboard them, you actually tie their face to a legal ID. It's very strong. That's it. Those are our two unique, strong factors of authentication. Verified face, which is not just a face, it's a person. And a verified device, which is attached to that person. Simple. We talked about how fraud detection keeps us safe from AI-generated fraud. We have a lot of things like the fraud scanner, deepfake detector, and deepfake shield. A lot of different ways for us to detect face morphing, abnormal reflection on eyes, abnormal blending of the face, abnormal background lighting. There's a bunch of things that happens with our computer vision algorithms. But more important than just scanning is how do we not only scan, how do we also detect, but more importantly, how do we protect? And this latest part is actually about designing the prevention that the deepfake cannot even enter your app in the first place. You protect against deepfake attacks, injection attacks, and that's a lot of stuff. So I think it can be a bit overwhelming. Try to give you the executive summary, and even then it's pretty long. But what if you didn't need all of these different things, which usually come from different solution providers, which come from different vendors? What if you could just have one solution? Something that combined identity verification, user authentication, and fraud detection into one. Bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu, that's exactly what we've done. VIDA is proud to announce today the launch of VIDA Identity Stack. In a world of AI-generated fraud, the VIDA Identity Stack was created to stop 99.9%. So you might think that's a crazy claim, and yes, it is a crazy claim, and we're happy to prove it. We're happy to prove it with our data. By having all these layers of defense, by having all of them orchestrated well together, defense in depth, that is the only way you achieve that result. We have results from the past quarter. We have data from existing clients in production where we've seen plenty of attacks. 0 have gotten through. Now, I won't ever guarantee 100%. That's just, that will set the bar impossibly high. But it's something that we can talk about in detail, and we can happily show you the data about how it works. So, let me show you how it works. So, I'll give you a basic run through, so it's not too much jargon of technology. Imagine an online lending app. Simple. It all starts with customer onboarding. VIDA document liveness and face liveness kick in. It's not just checking if the ID is real or if the face matches, but it's actually making sure that the person is actually there, that they're using a real device and they're live in person. VIDA Deepfake Shield prevents AI-generated fraud. We prevent injection attacks, we detect emulators to make sure there's no deepfake, there's no pre-recorded video, there's no screen attack. We even detect moire patterns to make sure it's not a screen attack. Just genuine, real-time verification. Now it's time to log in. Simple. And this is where VIDA Phone Token shines. No more passwords. There's a key in your phone. There's a private key in your phone. No OTP codes to type. Looks like you're just using device biometrics, but every transaction is signed. And we can apply for a loan. When we apply for a loan, boom. Powered by VIDA Sign, signature fields auto-populated. No redirect, no check your email, direct in-app experience. It's like having a personal assistant who knows exactly what you need and just when you need it, and you just click through. And while all of this is happening, our fraud prevention tools are hard at work behind the scenes. VIDA Fraud Scanner and Deepfake Detector are scanning every transaction, looking for threats before they even happen. And then, of course, let's change our profile details. Something that's sensitive. So when you have risky activities like this, which can usually lead to account takeovers, this is where Face Token makes sure the account is safe by doing 2 very strong factors of authentication. By authenticating the user is the same person who opened the account. Simple as that. It's like you're doing another KYC, but it's actually an authentication. And we check the device. That same time when you click Trust the Device, there's a private key, just like a token, just like a banking token, that's in your phone. Non-extractable, secure, stored in hardware. It's this multiple layers of security that is how it works. It needs to work in perfect harmony. And the protection never stops. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the VIDA Identity Stack. It's not just a product, it's a revolution in digital trust. And in a world of AI-generated fraud, it's the revolution that we need. As fraudsters evolve, so do we. VIDA Identity Stack learns, adapts, and evolves as well. Everything to make sure that our clients and their customers, your customers, can safely transact online. We couldn't have done this without our amazing customers and partners, and we're really thankful for all of your support, all of your trust. And your trust drives us, it drives us to innovate, to push boundaries, and to create a safer digital world for everyone. And to prove our commitment to stopping fraud and to keeping your businesses safe, we're going to have one more last announcement. The VIDA Identity Stack is free. So, you're probably wondering, what's the catch? And it's simple. Every dollar, every rupiah that you invest in the VIDA Identity Stack, we will match. We will match you with that to use any of our products to help stop fraud. We're willing to put our money where our mouth is. We're willing to live by our brand promise and prove to you the value before you have to take that leap of faith to invest or not. That's what we're prepared to do. It's our IP, it's our software, it's our technology. This is something we can stand behind ourselves. So, we have a really wonderful lineup of speakers today. Really lucky, feel very excited. Had a great session with Mikko earlier this morning. Thank you very much for joining us, and we're going to have a lot of discussions. We're going to have a really exciting special endgame session with Pak Gita later as well today. So really looking forward to it. I hope you're looking forward to it today, and I hope you're enjoying learning about the world of digital fraud. Not necessarily a topic we think about every day, but I think a topic that needs to be discussed. And at the end of the day, how you can protect your business, your customers, and our trust in each other. Thank you very much. Thank you for your trust.
Once again, everyone, Bapak Niki Luhur, could you please put your hands together? Thank you so much, Bapak Niki Luhur. So on Pak Niki's very beginning speech or presentation, he shared with us a lot of information, a lot of data that is very concerning and very interesting as well, overwhelming. But luckily, now we have VIDA Identity Stack, and it's free. So once again, everyone put your hands together for VIDA Identity Stack. Yes. Okay, we're about to continue. Our first session of this afternoon, powered by AFTEC, will focus on the regulatory approach to AI-driven fraud and cybersecurity in Indonesia's digital ecosystem. So without further ado, everyone, please welcome Mr. Aris Setiadi, Executive Director of the Indonesia Fintech Associations. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan dan kita sambut Bapak Aris Setiadi.
Ya, selamat siang Bapak Ibu rekan-rekan sekalian. Senang sekali kami dari AFTEC atau Asosiasi Fintech Indonesia menjadi bagian dari VIDA Executive Summit hari ini. Dan di sesi kali ini, di sesi Executive Forum powered by AFTEC, kita akan berdiskusi dengan tema Economic Outlook, Regulatory Approach to AI-Driven Fraud, and Cybersecurity in Digital Ecosystem in Indonesia. Topik ini sangat relevan, tadi Pak Niki bilang ini jarang dibicarakan, tapi harus dibicarakan. Dan di satu sisi, transformasi teknologi kita lihat memberikan peningkatan terhadap inklusi keuangan di Indonesia, peningkatan efisiensi, dan juga peningkatan inovasi lintas yurisdiksi, seiring dengan perkembangan dari sektor keuangan yang juga semakin borderless. Tapi di sisi lain, perkembangan ini juga tidak terlepas dari tantangan dan juga ancaman, terlebih dengan artificial intelligence atau kecerdasan buatan yang juga saat ini tidak di satu sisi membantu tadi gitu ya perkembangannya, tetapi di sisi lain juga menambah tantangan dan ancamannya. Di sesi ini kita akan mendengarkan langsung pandangan dari regulator, Otoritas Jasa Keuangan dan juga Bank Indonesia mengenai pendekatan dari sisi regulasi untuk pengentasan dari kejahatan siber dan juga tantangan fraud berbasis artificial intelligence. Untuk itu saya mengundang dua panelis kita pada siang hari ini. Pertama, ada Bapak Dudi Dermawan Saputra. Pada saat ini Bapak Dudi menjabat sebagai Direktur sekaligus Kepala Grup Sistem Pembayaran Nilai Besar dan Perizinan Sistem Pembayaran Retail pada Departemen Kebijakan Sistem Keuangan atau biasa kita sebut DKSP Bank Indonesia. Beliau memiliki latar belakang S3 Doktor Ekonomi Terapan dari Universitas Pajajaran dan aktif sebagai pembicara di event-event internasional, antara lain 47 Meeting of Executive Meetings of East Asia Pacific Central Banks, Working Group on Payments and Market Infrastructures, dan juga 22nd Roundtable on Capital Market and Financial Reform in Asia, CBDC Indonesia Case di Tokyo. Pak Dudi kami undang ke atas panggung. Para hadirin kita beri aplaus yang meriah kepada Pak Dudi dari Bank Indonesia. Silakan Pak. Dan pembicara kita kedua di panel siang hari ini ada Ibu Riani Sagita yang saat ini bekerja sebagai Senior Supervisor di Otoritas Jasa Keuangan. Dengan bidang yang ditangani mencakup Corporate Finance, Capital Market Development, Capital Market Examiner, Capital Market Data Analysis, dan juga Digital Service and Cybersecurity. Ibu Riani memperoleh gelar dari The National Graduate Institute for Public Policy Studies, or GRIPS, di Jepang dengan gelar Master of Arts in Public Economics dan juga saat ini memegang sertifikasi Certified Security Analyst atau CSA. Saya juga undang Ibu Riani untuk ke atas panggung. Bapak Ibu sekalian, kembali mohon tepuk tangannya untuk Ibu Riani. Selamat datang Pak Dudi, Bu Riani, apa kabar?
Baik.
Pak, kita akan mulai diskusi. Tadi kita dari pagi sudah membicarakan masalah fraud, penggunaan kecerdasan buatan juga dalam fraud. Tapi kita ingin melihat dulu saat ini gitu ya, perkembangan dari teknologi dalam sistem keuangan, fintech maupun ekosistem ekonomi digital di Indonesia secara keseluruhan, dari sisi OJK dan juga dari Bank Indonesia gitu. Bagaimana peran dari peningkatan teknologi ini untuk peningkatan inklusi atau tadi efisiensi di sektor keuangan, dan bagaimana juga dengan tantangan-tantangan yang dihadapi dengan perkembangan kecerdasan buatan ini, Pak?
Terima kasih Pak Aris. Kalau boleh mungkin saya langsung nanti nyambung ke blueprint juga ya Pak Aris ya. Jadi kalau boleh ini ada satu perkembangan yang sangat menarik dari blueprint kita di tahun 2025 kemarin. Jadi kalau boleh ditayangkan tayangannya biar clear. Nah, ini transaksi digital tadi yang seperti disampaikan memang sangat meningkat pesat. Jadi hasil dari blueprint kami 2019-2025 itu kelihatan bahwa seluruh transaksi yang terkait dengan digital itu sangat meningkat pesat. Nah, apa yang kita lakukan untuk menghindari resiko? Salah satunya adalah kita menggunakan standar National Open API. Jadi di sini kita menyamakan level of playing field antara bank dan fintech. Jadi ini kita samakan ada 81 subservices yang memungkinkan nanti bank dengan fintech itu saling istilahnya berintegrasi satu sama lain. Kemudian fast payment yang baru kita luncurkan di 2020 juga langsung meningkat pesat, dan transaksi kris sekarang tuh sudah menyentuh lebih dari 3,5 miliar transaksi sampai akhir. Padahal target kita kemarin cuma 2,5 miliar. Sekarang sudah 3,5 miliar. Dan kemudian juga kami juga melakukan elektronifikasi. Jadi seluruh pemerintah, transaksi pemerintah, kami upayakan untuk berubah dari yang tadinya sifatnya manual menjadi cashless. Nah, salah satu indikatornya kami juga baru menerbitkan kemarin kartu kredit pemerintah dan kartu kredit Indonesia yang intinya adalah 40% dari pengeluaran APBN atau sekitar 400 triliun nanti akan menggunakan kartu kredit pemerintah. Jadi dalam konteks ini UMKM akan langsung terdorong untuk transaksi menggunakan kartu kredit ini. Dan kartu kredit pemerintah ini juga fee-nya hanya 1%. Buying compare to Visa and Master 2%, 2.5%. Jadi akan lebih efisien. Jadi inilah kembali ke ini. Dan kemudian juga digital payment juga 3 kali dari PDB-nya, akan jauh lebih pesat. Kemudian juga digitalisasi perbankan juga meningkat, dan rasio inklusi juga semakin meningkat. Nah inilah ini. Kami juga harus melakukan regulatory reform. Dari yang 134 menjadi 4 ketentuan. Jadi sangat simplifikasi. Yang tadinya role based menjadi principle based. Nah di halaman berikutnya, kami ingin menyampaikan bahwa tadi seperti yang disampaikan VIDA juga memang saya sepakat. Perubahan istilahnya adanya big tech itu merubah level playing field. Dalam konteks ini adalah pada saat ada fingerprint, pada saat ada facial recognition, pada saat ada voice recognition, di situ ada muncul yang namanya fraud, ada voice takeover, begitu ada facial recognition atau biometrik, ada yang namanya deepfake. Dan ini faktanya, kami kemarin baru melakukan hackathon. Dalam konteks ini kami mencoba melakukan uji coba penggunaan AI. Jadi pada saat perusahaan melakukan biometrik, ternyata yang namanya fraudster tuh, hacker tuh jauh lebih canggih. Jadi yang di waktu di hackathon itu yang dilakukan adalah pada saat misalnya dia onboarding untuk digital banking, bahwa saya adalah Dudi, ternyata saya sudah di take over oleh Mas Aris. Nah, yang dilakukan adalah satu voice take over dilakukan dulu istilahnya harus dilakukan voice take over untuk memastikan bahwa suara saya adalah Dudi. Kemudian yang kedua adalah saya harus menghilangkan istilahnya defect-nya sehingga baru ketahuan bahwa biometrik itu berjalan lancar. Terus terang, ini investasinya sangat tinggi. Beberapa bank sudah melakukan biometrik yang begitu canggih, ternyata tetap masih terkena defect. Jadi inilah kasus nyatanya. Sehingga dalam konteks ini menjadi sangat penting bagi kita untuk melihat sebenarnya mereka tuh jauh lebih canggih. Dalam konteks ini kami sudah pelajari bahwa yang namanya hacker itu dari sisi pengetahuan dia eksponensial. Sementara IT kompetensi kita sifatnya adalah linear, sehingga gapnya inilah yang harus diisi oleh semacam institusi seperti VIDA ini. Karena itu yang bisa mengisi gap dari kompetensi dari keterbatasan dari SDM. Nah itu. Nah kemudian fakta lainnya di kita adalah pada saat misalnya sudah ketahuan bahwa itu di take over, dananya itu dibawa lari, tiba-tiba lari ke crypto aset. Mohon maaf ya Bu ya, karena di sini kan otoritinya berbeda. Bank Indonesia lihat follow the money, begitu follow the money masuk ke crypto aset, kita nggak bisa ngapain. Tapi kita tahu bahwa itu adalah hasil dari kejahatan. Begitu diputar-putar lagi ini, akhirnya ketahuan, diuangkan di Filipina. Nah, baru kali ini kalau pagi tadi dengar di Kompas, di Filipina digerebek 81 WNI dan termasuk kejadian judi segala macam adalah pusatnya di sana. Karena pada presiden sebelumnya masih membolehkan terkait dengan kebijakan tersebut. Nah, di halaman berikutnya inilah yang kami lakukan di blueprint, bahwa level of playing field antara fintech dan perbankan harus sama. Ada yang namanya TIKMI. Tadi untuk mengatasi gap itu, kami melihat bahwa ada yang namanya transaksi, interkoneksi, kompetensi, manajemen risiko dan infrastruktur yang akan berbeda-beda. Sehingga konsep di sini adalah kami harus meningkatkan kompetensi dari seluruh level, dari mulai lowest level sampai high level, bahwa mereka harus certify. Kemudian manajemen risiko juga nanti harus terstandarisasi sehingga mereka bisa aware terkait dengan istilahnya kejahatan cyber ini. Kemudian juga kami akan langsung nanti merubah regulatory reform. Mungkin nanti di pertanyaan berikutnya. Mungkin ini gambaran dari kami. Demikian Pak Aris.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Dudi. Kita lihat tadi di sisi sistem pembayaran, gitu ya, transaksi keuangan meningkat pesat, gitu, lihat dari BI Fast, lalu kemudian KRIS yang pertumbuhannya juga sampai di atas 100%, yang mana sebenarnya di satu sisi bagus gitu ya tadi untuk peningkatan inklusi, berarti ekonomi juga tumbuh, tapi di sisi lain tadi ada bermunculan tantangan-tantangan gitu ya seperti Deepfakes yang sayangnya pertumbuhannya jauh lebih cepat gitu ya dibandingkan dari kemampuan dari sisi industri maupun dari sisi regulator gitu, sehingga jadi perlu kerjasama antara industri dan regulator. Kalau dari sisi OJK, Bu Riani, bagaimana di industri keuangan yang berada dalam ranah OJK gitu ya, perkembangan dari fintech, lalu kemudian sekarang inovasi teknologi sektor keuangan gitu ya, dan juga tantangan-tantangan yang dihadapi, dan OJK juga baru terakhir ini merilis juga peraturan OJK terkait strategi anti fraud gitu ya untuk lembaga jasa keuangan, dan juga sempat juga di tahun lalu dengan 4 asosiasi termasuk Aftek, lalu kemudian asosiasi fintech pendanaan bersama dan asosiasi fintech syariah, dan juga asosiasi layanan urun dana dengan OJK itu meluncurkan juga panduan untuk artificial intelligence yang bertanggung jawab. Mungkin bisa sharing, Bu Riani.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Aris. Selamat siang Bapak Ibu. Saya di sini dari OJK, lebih tepatnya perwakilan dari sektor pengawasan inovasi teknologi keuangan digital, aset digital dan aset termasuk aset kripto. Untuk perkembangan industri fintech sendiri gitu, seperti yang kita tahu bahwa sebelumnya industri fintech ini di bawah satu direktorat yang ada di OJK gitu. Jadi memang sekarang sudah meluas nih Pak, dengan semakin banyaknya inovasi-inovasi yang sudah berkembang itu, sekarang sudah semakin diperlukan suatu pengaturan khusus di mana sekarang menjadi satu bidang Pak gitu. Sekarang kita sedang mereview kembali Pak, seperti yang kita tahu banyak fintech-fintech yang waktu itu berada di regulatory sandbox gitu, sekarang dalam proses pendaftaran gitu, dan akan berkembang di mana amanat Undang-Undang P2SK juga nanti tahun depan akan ada pengawasan aset digital dan aset kripto di OJK gitu. Jadi memang saat ini sangat penting Pak terkait dengan AI, digital fraud. Nah itu kan hal-hal yang akan nantinya menjadi fokus pengawasan dari OJK sendiri gitu Pak. Memang saat ini kita dalam tataran menyiapkan pengaturannya, seperti yang Bapak bilang tadi, POJK strategi anti fraud yang 2012 tahun 2024 itu sebenarnya bukan POJK baru Pak gitu. Jadi memang dulu sudah ada POJK strategi anti fraud yang di masing-masing sektor. Nah memang yang sekarang ini jadi satu OJK wide gitu, di mana fraud itu di sektor keuangan sekarang sudah termasuk dalam digital fraud gitu. Kita menggunakan ICFA free fraud itu, di mana nanti selain kejahatan-kejahatan konvensional juga termasuk kejahatan digital fraud itu. Cuma untuk peraturannya sendiri memang compliant base itu nanti akan terkait dengan pelaporan itu, bagaimana mereka perusahaan-perusahaan di industri jasa keuangan termasuk fintech gitu mempunyai strategi anti fraud gitu. Kemudian nanti laporan-laporan apabila terjadi fraud nantinya itu akan juga disampaikan ke OJK, di mana nanti database-nya itu bisa kita gunakan untuk pengawasan terintegrasi gitu. Pada saat nanti laporan masuk nama-nama orang-orang yang memang pernah melakukan fraud itu nanti akan kita olah untuk kita jadikan materi pengawasan yang bisa digunakan di pengawasan OJK secara meluas. Kemudian kita juga tahun lalu ya Pak sudah menyampaikan atau merilis pedoman conduct AI itu, memang kita sudah melihat bahwa AI ini akan digunakan banyak oleh fintech ke depannya. Salah satunya itu terkait juga machine learning gitu, di mana kalau kita lihat sekarang ACS ya Pak, inovatif credit scoring itu modelingnya juga kan pasti menggunakan AI itu. Nah itu juga perlu diatur lebih lanjut, walaupun sekarang mungkin tatanannya masih pedoman gitu Pak. Pedoman itu kan lebih ke memberikan informasi terkait kode etik apa sih yang harus kita ikuti gitu, apa yang harus kita tanamkan dalam kita menerapkan AI itu, prinsip kewajarannya, kemudian akuntabilitasnya seperti apa, kemudian benefitnya seperti apa, apakah benefitnya nanti ternyata lebih rendah dibanding resiko yang dihadapi gitu. Karena resikonya tadi dari pagi juga sudah disebutkan resiko-resiko yang mungkin terjadi gitu. Dari sisi fraudnya AI, dari sisi mungkin social engineering juga gitu. Nah itu tantangan-tantangan yang kedepannya akan terus kita akomodir Pak. Dari sisi perkembangan roadmap kita juga sudah termasuk gitu, termasuk pengembangan cyber, penguatan cyber, di mana selain yang AI tadi dan POJK anti fraud juga kita sudah mengeluarkan pedoman keamanan cyber untuk penyelenggara ITSK yang bisa kita jadikan acuan untuk menerapkan hal-hal apa sih yang harus kita tekankan dalam sistem keamanan data dan informasi, karena seperti yang disebut Pak Mikko tadi pagi bahwa information is a data gitu. Jadi semua informasi yang kita berikan itu akan jadi data. Nah itu nanti adalah tanggung jawab kita semua pengguna sistem, pembuat sistem gitu, bagaimana mengamankan data tersebut gitu Pak. Demikian dari kami Pak.
Ya, terima kasih Bu Riani. Ini memang tadi dari OJK ada semacam guideline gitu ya, yang sifatnya dalam bentuk peraturan OJK untuk anti fraud, lalu kemudian ada juga untuk panduan kode etik artificial intelligence yang bertanggung jawab, dan juga kemarin juga baru diluncurkan juga blueprint untuk industri inovasi teknologi sektor keuangan, aset keuangan digital dan aset kripto gitu ya, atau biasa disebut IAKD. Nah, saya kembali ke Pak Dudi Pak, dari pengalaman di Bank Indonesia Pak di sistem pembayaran gitu ya. Dengan tadi ancaman, tantangan yang didorong peningkatan transformasi teknologi seperti artificial intelligence ini, apa saja sih inisiatif dari Bank Indonesia yang sudah ada, baik tadi di blueprint yang juga baru diperbarui di BSPI 2030, ataupun pengaturan-pengaturan lain yang tujuannya untuk pelindungan dari sistem pembayaran itu sendiri Pak, atau jika ada use case di sistem pembayaran.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Aris. Kalau boleh saya kasih kasus yang real ya, terkait dengan penanganan judul. Kebetulan juga kami, BI dan OJK juga jadi satgas dari judul. Kenapa? Ini karena sumber dari seluruh poster itu ada di judul. Jadi kalau boleh ditayangkan, jadi transaksi judul ini kalau kita lihat 77% memang di-trigger dari transfer bank. Nah ini. Dan kemudian yang menarik adalah sebenarnya bank tuh punya keterbatasan untuk sampai ke misalnya ke penampung segala macam. Disitulah muncul yang namanya virtual account. Nah, kemudian yang kedua, di sini juga ada yang menarik, 5% adalah minimarket. Nah, pada saat kami berdiskusi terkait dengan kejahatan melalui minimarket, timbullah inisiatif, ya udah semua minimarket di Indonesia ditutup. Alfamart sama Indomart, bukan seperti itu masalahnya. Karena pada saat misalnya seseorang misalnya masuk beli untuk game online atau untuk beli istilahnya voucher segala macam, itu kan kasir kan nggak tahu apa-apa, terimanya cash, ya kan? Kemudian, nah berarti ada siapa yang memfasilitasi itu? Disitulah ada yang namanya IT solution, kemudian ada yang namanya agregator segala macam. Nah inilah pusat dari semua kerusuhan dari semuanya itu. Contohnya, pada saat misalnya virtual account itu muncul, ketentuan OJK adalah bahwa semua bank yang mengeluarkan virtual account wajib mengetahui sampai end usernya. Nah sekarang tadi data kris kami punya pengguna sekitar 55 juta. Nggak mungkin bank dengan nasabah lebih dari 1 juta, 2 juta dia tahu setiap orangnya. Sehingga disinilah fungsi dari agregator yang nanti harus betul-betul dilihat. Kemudian yang kedua, dari uang elektronik, kami juga melihat bahwa ada penyalahgunaan yang tadinya uang elektronik server base yang unregistered. Itu juga banyak di leveraging untuknya ini. Kemudian yang ketiga, ada yang kris. Kami sudah keluarkan kris, tadi sudah kami sampaikan, 3,5 miliar transaksi meningkat begitu tepat. Tapi ada berapa persen memang digunakan untuk judi online. Nah disinilah kami di sini menggunakan fraud detection system. Bagaimana kita bisa mengetahui pola dari pelaku-pelaku tersebut, terutama dari bandar dari ini. Contohnya, yang paling gampang adalah biasanya untuk bandar ini adalah many to ones. Dia terima terus, frekuensinya tinggi, tapi sekali store dia langsung hilang. Kemudian yang kedua, dormant account yang tadinya dia pasif, tiba-tiba aktif sedemikian pesat. Kemudian yang menarik adalah istilahnya kewajarannya. Seorang petani di Wonosobo yang dia ini tiba-tiba transaksinya langsung miliaran. Nah itulah apa istilahnya indikator dari fraud detection system yang kita coba untuk istilahnya cegah untuk terkait dengan judul ini. Saya sampaikan di sini. Kenapa? Karena hampir yang kami targetkan ini di tanggal 20 Oktober nanti, begitu misalnya Pak Prabowo diangkat jadi presiden, akan keluar uang makan siang. Anak SD sekarang itu bermain judul antara Rp400 sampai Rp1.000. Jadi kebayang begitu uang makan siang nanti diganti dengan voucher, otomatis dia akan bermain judi lebih banyak lagi. Ada 10 juta atau lebih dari 5% anak-anak itu sudah terkontaminasi dengan judi online. Jadi mohon bantuan dari industri di sini, mungkin dari VIDA juga kalau bisa itu algoritma apa yang bisa mendeteksi terkait dengan judi online ini. Karena ini ini adalah kerusakan secara struktural yang bisa merusak moral anak bangsa kita. Jadi kalau misalnya ini bisa dicegah, otomatis ini bisa kita hindari berikutnya. Mungkin ini salah satu contoh Pak ya, yang kalau boleh disampaikan.
Ya Pak, ini memang benar kali isu judul ini akhir-akhir ini marak kembali gitu ya. Terlebih dengan ranah digital dan penggunaan fintech untuk sarana judi online gitu. Dan memang kami di asosiasi juga diskusi Pak dengan para members kami gitu. Beberapa use case itu memang ketika proses onboarding, KYC atau KYM-nya gitu ya. Semuanya tampak normal gitu sesuai dengan prosedur, tetapi kemudian jika dilihat transaksinya gitu, muncullah kecurigaan gitu ya. Misalkan penjualan hanya terjadi di jam 11 malam dengan skala kecil tapi intensitas yang cukup tinggi gitu. Jadi sekarang mungkin KYM di awal itu tidak cukup gitu ya, CDD tidak cukup, tetapi juga perlu frekuensi yang juga cukup sering untuk kembali mengecek merchant gitu ya Pak. Nah, saya ke Bu Riyadi, dari sisi OJK sendiri, Bu Riyadi, tadi menyebutkan ada regulatory sandbox gitu ya. Di satu sisi kita lihat ada juga pengembangan teknologi yang digunakan untuk pengentasan fraud secara digital gitu ya, dengan penggunaan artificial intelligence. Dari OJK sendiri untuk regulatory sandbox yang baru, apakah akan ada juga mencakup isu-isu terkait dengan cybersecurity ini, ataupun ada pengembangan aspek lain gitu ya, yang tujuannya juga untuk mendorong peningkatan keamanan di ranah siber?
Ya, untuk regulatory sandbox sendiri memang kita masih open ya Pak. Ketika emang ada model bisnis baru seperti VIDA tadi itu kan memang untuk authentication gitu, fraud detection itu kan bisa untuk masuk ke regulatory sandbox, atau nanti mungkin ke depannya ada cybersecurity innovation gitu yang bisa mendetek aplikasi yang bisa mendetek keamanan cyber gitu. Nah itu sangat dimungkinkan untuk masuk ke regulatory sandbox untuk nanti kita review lebih lanjut gitu Pak. Apakah nanti memang mereka bisa layak untuk dipergunakan secara umum gitu ketika memang terdaftar dan sudah berizin, itu kan building trust buat entitas itu sendiri gitu. Jadi ketika memang nanti reviewnya sudah berhasil dan sudah mendapatkan izin, itu bisa nanti digunakan oleh teman-teman fintech yang lain gitu untuk fraudnya sendiri, dan mungkin bisa juga sebagai strategi anti fraudnya perusahaan fintech sendiri gitu Pak. Itu kan juga memang merupakan salah satu cara ya bagaimana mereka bisa menangani fraud dari kejahatan AI, dari cyber security. Nah itu kan bisa menjadi suatu value added yang bisa dijual oleh perusahaan fintech itu sendiri.
Ya, tadi saya tertarik dengan Pak Dudi sempat menyentuh juga isu fraud detection system gitu ya, dan kami juga mendengar di BI akan mengembangkan BI Clear Payment gitu yang tujuannya juga untuk mengumpulkan sebagai semacam shared database gitu ya untuk fraud identification, dan di OJK juga akan dikembangkan si pelaku ya.
Si pelaku.
Itu mungkin bisa di-share dari Bu Riani terlebih dahulu terkait dengan si pelaku.
Nah, terkait dengan si pelaku, dengan terbitnya POJK 12 ini memang sudah menjadi mandatori bagi PUJK untuk melaporkan person-person atau people yang pernah atau mungkin terlibat atau terindikasi melakukan fraud. Nah, momen dari si pelaku ini nanti akan dirilis itu bulan November, itu datanya akan diolah lebih lanjut dan digabungkan dengan laporan-laporan dari sektor keuangan yang lainnya, misalkan dari perbankan ada nama si A gitu, kemudian dari IKNB mungkin ada nama si A juga, dari fintech mungkin nanti ada nama si A. Nah, itu merupakan kalau kita bicara risk management ada namanya detection gitu, itu merupakan deteksi awal gitu. Jika nanti ada fit and proper test, suatu perusahaan mau election buat direksi baru, berarti kan itu kita bisa melakukan pengecekan di sistem si pelaku itu gitu, karena nanti LJK itu pasti akan memiliki akses untuk melakukan pengecekan terhadap orang-orang yang mungkin namanya sudah pernah masuk ke dalam blacklist tuh Pak. Pelaku akan seperti itu nanti.
Apakah akan ada pemanfaatan AI juga Bu, di dalam sistem si pelaku?
Untuk saat ini memang belum, tapi kedepannya itu kita juga sedang mengembangkan kajian terkait dengan market intelligence dan sentiment analysis Pak. Itu juga nanti akan diintegratedkan dengan si pelaku ini, tapi tidak dalam waktu 2024 ini gitu. Kedepannya sedang dikaji ulang untuk penggunaan AI di market intelligence.
Dari Pak Dudi, kalau di BI seperti apa Pak untuk pengembangan?
Kami kedepannya akan istilahnya mengeluarkan yang namanya PRM. PRM itu proaktif risk management. Dalam artian semua fraudster yang dimiliki oleh BCP, baik bank maupun fintech, itu nanti akan sentralisasi ke Bank Indonesia. Jadi semua transaksi pada saat misalnya saya bertransaksi dan saya terindikasi fraudster, begitu saya send gitu, itu langsung keluar alert dari Bank Indonesia. Nah, di sini bank atau fintech nanti akan mengecek go or no go-nya dari mereka. Jadi kita kasih error code. Error code itu memungkinkan dia untuk menghold transaksi selama 5 hari sesuai dengan ketentuan APO PPT. Kenapa? Ini penting karena fraudster ini kan kalau sekarang kan masing-masing bank punya. Kemudian masing-masing fintech punya, jadi silo. Jadi dengan adanya fraudster istilahnya PRM ini, kita kumpulkan namanya di BI Payment Info. Jadi semua transaksi baik incoming maupun outgoing akan kita kumpulkan. Kemudian semua yang terindikasi fraudster termasuk mereka-mereka yang terlibat dari kejahatan APO PPT ada di BI Payment Info. Dan semua transaksi akan men-trigger, baik itu transaksi yang sifatnya retail maupun wholesale. Jadi yang kedua adalah seluruh bank, seluruh fintech itu wajib nanti sharing terkait dengan siapa-siapa saja yang selama ini terlibat sebagai fraudster. Kemudian yang terakhir adalah edukasi, literasi. Kenapa? Pada saat fraudster itu ketahuan, maka apa yang dilakukan oleh PJP atau bank atau fintech, maka mereka bisa melakukan istilahnya tindakan langsung untuk pencegahannya. Itu yang kami harapkan. Makanya kenapa dari tadi kompetensi dari pengguna maupun kompetensi dari pegawai itu harus sudah kita standarisasikan sehingga mereka aware terhadap terjadinya kejahatan cyber atau fintech ini. Dan sebagai contoh ya, tadi kan disampaikan juga contohnya misalnya kejahatan OTP. Memang dari ketentuan bahwa setiap bank pada saat misalnya untuk melindungi istilahnya keamanan transaksi, dia harus menggunakan OTP. Tapi tanpa dengan edukasi sebagai contoh, yang kejadian terakhir tuh di Padang yang sangat begitu ditanya, Bu, berapa OTP-nya? Ini saya temannya Ibu. Nah akhirnya OTP-nya kan keluar kan, karena dia udah mengatasnamakan nama dari anaknya. Nah ketidaktahuan ini yang dimanfaatkan oleh mereka-mereka yang memang sudah untuk melakukan takeover. Tetapi yang kita wajibkan ke bank adalah pada saat misalnya itu sudah mengeksekusi dari rekening, maka wajib dilakukan two layers, multi layer tadi istilahnya. Artinya selain OTP juga harus dikonfirmasi dengan biometrik. Itu betul nggak? Terkonfirmasi nggak bahwa yang menelpon itu anaknya atau siapanya? Itu memastikan bahwa bank tahu bahwa oh ini sudah lakukan takeover oleh mereka-mereka yang memang berbuat jahat. Artinya apa? Mereka sudah jauh lebih tahu Pak untuk istilahnya menghindari istilahnya screening dari bank. Tetapi begitu kita lakukan istilahnya multi security, sehingga kejahatan yang layering itu bisa kita hindari berikutnya. Mungkin itu Pak.
Ya, betul sekali Pak. Memang tidak hanya bisa dijaga dari sisi industrinya saja, tetapi pengguna juga yang menjadi tombak gitu ya, di mana di sini bisa terjadi loophole atau enggak gitu. Tadi seperti Pak Dudi bilang, kita udah pakai pengamanan two-way authentication, tapi ternyata tetap di-share juga OTP-nya ya, akhirnya sama aja gitu ya. Tapi kemudian juga solusi-solusi baru seperti penggunaan facial recognition itu juga menjadi salah satu metode ya Pak untuk
ada lagi Pak Aris ini yang menarik nih. Dari kasus judol 499 website dari milik Pemda itu di take over oleh hacker. Kenapa? Karena passwordnya adalah 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pentungan, udah itu. Yang tadi di bawah 1 detik itu. Akhirnya, ya itu ini fakta Pak, ini 544 di take over. Dan langsung jadi ya itulah, jadi portal judol. Mungkin itu Pak, sedikit informasi.
Iya, tadi seperti itu mengkonfirmasi dari Paniki gitu. Nomor 1 password paling umum adalah 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Gitu. Kalau dari sisi penggunaan artificial intelligence gitu di Bank Indonesia ataupun di OJK mungkin saat ini apakah juga sudah mulai digunakan Pak untuk tentu di satu sisi untuk pengembangan inovasi gitu ya, di sisi lain juga untuk pencegahan fraud dan juga mungkin scam, apakah sudah berjalan juga Pak, mungkin bisa di-share?
Jadi kita ada yang namanya transaksi wholesale. Jadi di transaksi wholesale ada yang namanya liquidity saving mechanism. Liquidity saving mechanism itu untuk memastikan bahwa transaksi itu istilahnya good fund, no money no game kalau istilahnya di kita. Nah, itu memastikan bahwa seluruh transaksi bisa berjalan efisien. Itulah penggunaan machine learning dan AI yang kita terapkan nanti di generasi ketiga. Kemudian yang kedua, AI yang kita gunakan adalah yang terkait dengan proactive risk management tadi. Karena sifatnya data itu granular dan sangat istilahnya bukan lagi jutaan tapi sudah miliaran data, sehingga kita bisa mendetek kira-kira transaksi mana yang sifatnya anomali, transaksi mana yang sifatnya tidak wajar, transaksi mana yang sifatnya istilahnya fraudster, itu sudah kita detek. Algoritma ini yang terus kita kembangkan sehingga nanti pada saat algoritma ini menjadi standar, codingnya akan nanti kami berikan kepada PJP, istilahnya bank atau fintech yang selama ini fraud detection sistemnya masih sangat lemah. Itu mungkin contoh dari ini. Yang ketiga, kami juga istilahnya sudah mulai menggunakan untuk analisis untuk ekonomi segala macam, penggunaan database, semua kita kumpulkan dan kemudian menggunakan machine learning dan terakhir menggunakan AI juga untuk kami di rapat Dewan Gubernur.
Terima kasih Pak Dudi. Bu Riani, tadi disebutkan nanti di Januari gitu ya, aset keuangan digital, aset kripto akan berpindah pengawasannya dari yang saat ini di Bapepti kepada OJK gitu. Dan tadi sempat disinggung juga sama Pak Dudi nih, aset kripto ini juga menjadi salah satu celah gitu ya yang bisa dimanfaatkan. Di sisi lain tentu ini jadi satu inovasi yang juga turut mendorong inklusi gitu ya, turut juga mendorong pertumbuhan ekonomi di Indonesia dengan transaksinya yang meningkat sangat luar biasa. Tetapi di sisi lain tadi ada celah yang bisa dimanfaatkan. Kalau dari OJK persiapan untuk nanti tongkat estafet nih, untuk penanganan atau pengawasan dari industri kripto, apakah sudah ada yang disiapkan?
Saat ini memang kita sedang mempersiapkan infrastruktur untuk transisi pengawasan aset kripto dan dari Bapepti ke OJK gitu. Memang sedang disiapkan terkait dengan pengaturannya Pak saat ini. Dan untuk pengawasannya sendiri secara umum mungkin kita tidak, kalau bicara IAKD itu enggak cuma hanya aset kripto gitu. Untuk pengawasan sektor IAKD sendiri memang kita pendekatannya sudah ke supervisory teknologi Pak. Kita menggunakan SIP di mana nantinya juga menggunakan early warning system yang terkait langsung dengan sentimen analisis tadi gitu, karena OJK saat ini sedang mengembangkan sentimen analisis untuk PUJK-nya yang mungkin sedang dikembangkan di EPK gitu. Nah nanti sentimen analisis itu harapannya bisa terkoneksi dengan sistem pengawasan kami gitu, di mana data-data tersebut nanti bisa kita gunakan sebagai early warning system di pengawasan kita. Tapi itu memang secara umum gitu. Selain itu memang untuk AI sendiri sudah diterapkan secara OJK wide, itu mungkin dari sisi EPK-nya ya Pak, untuk seperti chatbot kita nyebutnya APPK untuk pelaporan jika ada keluhan atau jika ada transaksi-transaksi yang dicurigakan, itu kan bisa dilaporkan ke OJK itu Pak, termasuk pinjol dan termasuk juga judi online gitu. Nah itu sistemnya sendiri sudah menggunakan AI gitu. Nah untuk pengembangan supervisory teknologi ini yang memang sedang kita kaji dan sedang kita kembangkan untuk menggunakan machine learning. Untuk internal sendiri memang secara big data juga sudah dikembangkan untuk pengembangan AI itu sendiri.
Ya, Bu Reni tadi beberapa kali menyebutkan EPK gitu, kalau belum yang paham itu edukasi, literasi, dan perlindungan konsumen gitu ya. Nah, saya juga ingin jadi masuk ke tadi literasi keuangan gitu, terutama literasi keuangan di ranah digital gitu ya. Tadi Pak Dudi juga sempat menyebutkan bahwa bagaimana masyarakat menggunakan password yang ternyata sangat mudah ditebak gitu ya. Nah, survei terakhir dari OJK dan BPS menemukan tingkat inklusi keuangan di Indonesia di 2024 sudah mencapai 75%, tetapi literasi keuangannya baru 65% gitu. Jadi masih ada gap sekitar 10 percentage point dari masyarakat yang sudah mengakses layanan jasa keuangan yang formal gitu, tetapi masih belum paham sebenarnya terkait dengan risiko-risikonya gitu ya. Dan tentu untuk menangani ini gitu perlu upaya bersama dari regulator, industri, kami di asosiasi juga gitu. Dari Bank Indonesia terakhir Aftek juga bekerja sama untuk kegiatan Geber PK ya Pak, gerakan bersama peduli kenali dan adukan, dan juga di kemarin di OJK ada gencarkan gitu ya. Mungkin bisa di-share juga untuk kalau tadi kita udah membahas masalah-masalah yang terjadi, upaya dari regulator bersama dengan industri dan juga asosiasi yang sudah berjalan, mungkin dari Bu Riani terlebih dahulu untuk kegiatan di OJK.
Ya, baru-baru ini OJK khususnya IAKD sudah mengembangkan peta jalan atau roadmap untuk 2024 dan 2028. Di sana ada 3 pilar, dengan 3 pilar itu terdiri dari fase pengembangan, fase penguatan, fase pengembangan dan inovasi. Nah di fase penguatan ini salah satunya adalah penguatan terkait dengan digital literasi Pak. Memang digital literasi itu saat ini sudah dilakukan OJK khususnya IAKD, selain dari IAKD sendiri dan dari EPK juga terus menerus Pak. OJK juga mengeluarkan peraturan perlindungan konsumen dan peraturan literasi di mana PUJK sendiri diwajibkan untuk melakukan sosialisasi kepada penggunanya dan konsumennya gitu. Jadi secara bersama-sama kita sudah berkolaborasi juga dengan asosiasi, dengan PUJK-nya sendiri untuk terus-menerus memperkuat literasi khususnya digital masyarakat Indonesia. Untuk cybersecurity sendiri pun untuk IAKD kita minggu depan nih Pak kebetulan memang akan mengadakan seminar cybersecurity awareness gitu. Memang itu ditujukan untuk asosiasi dan penyelenggara IAKD yang sudah direkomendasikan oleh OJK untuk terdaftar. Itu salah satu bentuk dari kita melakukan literasi keuangan khususnya untuk PUJK-nya. Memang masalahnya seperti sudah disebutkan dengan Pak Dudi tadi gitu, bukan cuma di PUJK-nya gitu, justru di konsumennya itu. Nah itu yang terus kita tingkatkan Pak, digital literasi ini tidak cuma kepada masyarakat kelas menengah, tapi juga ke masyarakat pedalaman Pak. Kalau kita lihat dari edukasi EPK itu sudah sampai menjangkau masyarakat di perbatasan yang memang sangat rentan dengan fraud, cybersecurity dan dengan segala jenis apa tadi kita sebut itu kecurangan atau phishing tadi, social engineering terutama, Pak.
Kalau dari Bank Indonesia Pak Dudi.
Kalau boleh ini ada datanya yang menarik nih ya, di halaman 7. Jadi kita sudah kerjasama juga dengan rekening ID yang Kemeninfo. Jadi jumlah pengaduan itu sudah sangat banyak ya. Ini kita ambil 2023 berarti 2024 lebih tinggi lagi. Itu lebih dari 48,7 ribu dari pengaduan. Kemudian fraudsternya juga ada sekitar 28,2. Sementara kerugian terverifikasi ini 218 miliar. Nah, apa yang kita lakukan tadi memang sama dengan apa teman-teman OJK. Jadi literasi yang memang harus lebih ditingkatkan. Tapi yang terpenting di sini adalah bagaimana kami harus sharing informasi, itu yang nanti kami kembangkan di BI Kemeninfo. Kemudian seluruh inovasi yang dilakukan oleh industri, kami akan tampung melalui Bank Indonesia Digital Innovation Center. Jadi apapun yang dilakukan oleh industri kita taruh di BIDIK. Kita lakukan istilahnya ini seperti sandbox, end to end, mulai dari bisnis modelnya, kemudian regulasinya, dan kemudian sampai implementasinya. Jadi dari industri untuk industri sendiri yang nanti mengawasi. Jadi inilah yang nanti akan kita fasilitasi sehingga seluruh inovasi itu bisa terhindar dari kejahatan fraud ataupun cyber ini. Demikian.
Ya. Banyak hal yang memang harus didiskusikan terkait dengan keamanan siber, lalu kemudian fraud yang juga didorong oleh pengembangan artificial intelligence. Kita sudah berbicara banyak. Terima kasih sekali Pak Dudi Buryani atas sharingnya di OJK dan juga di Bank Indonesia. Dari diskusi siang hari ini kita tadi mendengarkan bagaimana transaksi di sektor keuangan meningkat, gitu. Tapi di sisi lain juga ancaman dari AI driven fraud ini juga mengalami peningkatan yang pesat, bahkan peningkatannya eksponensial gitu ya dibandingkan proses pencegahannya yang tumbuh secara linear. Tapi dengan berbagai macam inovasi pula dari sisi regulator, industri dan asosiasi, kita bersama-sama tentu menjaga bagaimana proses dan layanan dari industri jasa keuangan ini terus berjalan, tumbuh, berkontribusi positif terhadap pertumbuhan ekonomi di Indonesia dengan ranah yang aman, gitu ya, dengan teknologi artificial intelligence yang tadi juga kita bahas. Dan demikian diskusi kita siang hari ini. Semoga apa yang kita diskusikan bermanfaat untuk kita semua, karena tadi tidak hanya fungsi dari regulator, industri, dan asosiasi, tetapi juga kita sebagai pengguna yang harus juga turut menjaga bagaimana ekosistem ekonomi keuangan digital ini berjalan dengan aman dan lancar. Demikian sesi kita siang hari ini. Terima kasih atas perhatiannya. Selamat mengikuti sesi berikutnya. Selamat siang.
Terima kasih Bapak Ari Setiadi. Mohon jangan kemana-mana terlebih dahulu. Juga Ibu Riani Sagita dan Bapak Dudi Darmawan, mohon jangan kemana-mana. We would like to capture this moment. And for that, we would like to invite Bapak Niki Luhur as Group CEO of VIDA and also Mrs. Sati Raswanto, President VIDA, to give token of appreciation and also a group photo. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are being fed with this information, with this discussion, once again, could you please put your hands together? Kita berikan tepuk tangan sekali lagi for all of those information that Pak Ari Setiadi and also Ibu Riani Sagita and Bapak Dudi Darmawan already given us on this beautiful day. Kita foto terlebih dahulu. Terima kasih, thank you so much. Terima kasih Bapak Niki, Ibu Sati, Ibu Riani, Bapak Dudi dan juga Bapak Ari Setiadi. Kami persilakan untuk bisa kembali bergabung dengan seluruh tamu undangan. So ladies and gentlemen, you've already known a few or a lot of information about government regulations, working alongside with fintech company to protect Indonesian business from AI-generated digital fraud. Kami harapkan semua informasi tadi berguna untuk Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. And then we will continue this VIDA Executive Forum 2024 with the next session. Okay, as Mr. Nikki info in the beginning of this forum, that we will have Mr. Mikko Hypponen as a leading figure in cybersecurity. Oh, please put your hands together for Bapak Mikko. Oh, hold on, sir. Pak Mikko will present the opening keynote. His presentation, Cybercrime Unmasked, Lesson from Global Cyber Heights, will provide us with invaluable insights into the evolving threats and also the strategies to combat them. So, if you are as excited as I am right now, once again, everyone, please put your hands together for Mr. Mikko Hypponen. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan untuk Mr. Mikko.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. Indeed, my name is Mikko Hypponen. I am the Chief Research Officer for WithSecure Corporation. I'm happy to be here in Jakarta, since I'm based myself in Helsinki, Finland, which is where I've lived all my life. Indonesia is far away from Finland, but there's many things that join us together, as well as bring us feelings of togetherness. And as we are here to speak about technology, that's clearly one thing that's very similar in our countries. I've been working with technology and computers all my life, and when I started looking at the problem of malware and computer viruses, I could have never imagined how much the world would be changing because of cybercrime. Nothing changes our world as much as technology revolutions. We've seen this over and over again. And when technology is good enough, it becomes mandatory. An example I've often used about this is electricity. Electricity, of course, today is mandatory. We couldn't feed 8 billion people on this planet without electricity, but it's only been around for 150 years. Connectivity, the internet as we know it today, has been around for maybe 30 years, and it's quickly becoming as important as electricity. Every device we buy today plugs into the electricity grid, but also to the internet grid. And eventually we will see a day when a cut in connectivity is going to cut electricity. Right now it's the other way around, because if we have a power cut, routers don't work without electricity and we will lose internet as well. What I'm saying is that everything is becoming so connected that one day a cut in internet connectivity is going to cut power, which sounds crazy right now, but just mark my words. That's exactly the future that we are headed towards. And every technological revolution brings us upsides and downsides. Right now, we are seeing this shift very clearly with the latest technology revolution, which is generative AI, or artificial intelligence, or machine learning. Generative AI brings us completely new technologies that we couldn't imagine. When I was 13 years old, I read an article about artificial intelligence and how one day we would be capable of building the kind of systems we have today. 40 years later, it's finally real. Roughly at the same time, I read the first articles about quantum computing. That's becoming closer and closer to reality as well. We don't know exactly when we will have real practical quantum computers, but it's probably not too far away. So it's taken decades for us to build these technologies, but right now things are moving faster than ever before. And both AI revolution and quantum revolution are bringing us upsides and downsides. AI brings us great new exciting tools we can use to make our lives easier and to make our jobs better, but it's also exposing us to different kinds of frauds and fakes and attacks. Quantum computing is going to bring us more powerful computers than ever before. Computers which can solve problems we can't solve otherwise. They're also going to supercharge machine learning systems. At the same time, quantum computers will break most of the encryption systems we use today. And we don't just get the upsides, we will get the problems as well. Generative AI, the revolution at hand right now, is a revolution that can generate. That's what it really means. That's why we call it generative AI. And today we have more source material to feed to these learning algorithms than ever before. I recently finished a book by a Japanese author. I really liked the book. So when I finished, I wanted to read more books from the same author, but he had no other books published. So what do? Well, I go to GPT. Hey, GPT, I just read this book from this author. Can you recommend me other books that I might like? And it gave me an excellent list of book recommendations from different authors, from different countries, different themes. But when I started reading the books, it was absolutely correct. They were similar in style and substance and storytelling. And the difference with GPT and with traditional recommendation engines is crucial. The way recommendation engines used to work is that if you wanted recommendations for books or music or just video clips, these systems would recommend you content that other people have selected. People who listen to this song also listen to this song, so you probably like this. That's the way traditional recommendation engines work. And that's not the way GPT works. GPT is recommending me particular books because it has read the books. It's not recommending books that other humans like. It's recommending books that it likes because it has read all the books the mankind has ever published in all languages. That's how it can recommend content to you. This is a real revolution. This is unlike anything we've ever seen. We're on the verge of being able to build expert systems that will massively assist the way we do our jobs. Medical doctors go through a very long training to become subject matter experts in their field. They might be studying for a decade, reading hundreds of medical journals and medical books. They're real experts in their work. However, if I get sick, if I have a problem and I need to go to a doctor, I would rather go to a doctor which would also use generative AI to assist themselves. Because no matter how good you are, there's no human which could read all the medical books in the world, including the latest research published yesterday. An AI can do that. So I wouldn't want to go to an AI, but I wouldn't want to go to a lone human either. The best combination is a human doctor who's consulting with an expert system. A machine learning system which knows and remembers everything, which has read all medical research in all languages and remembers every little thing. And then a human could consult with the expert systems. Hey, here's the diagnosis, here's what we found. Is there anything you could think about that this could be? So the worry that computers or generative AI is going to come and take our jobs, I think there's a more realistic risk, which is that a human who's better at using AI than you are is the one who's going to take your job. Nevertheless, revolutions do change the way we work, and they do destroy some jobs. This has always been the case with every technological revolution, all the way from the Industrial Revolution. However, we've never had a revolution before which goes after the most trained white-collar jobs, like lawyers. Lawyer's job is a prime example of a kind of a job which can be automated with large language models. Physical labor, that's much harder to do. There's going to be less need for lawyers and more need for plumbers in this new world where generative AI is the norm. So a question that might arise is, why is this happening now? If I read about AI already in 1983, why did it take 40 years? And of course, one answer is that it took 40 years for us to digitalize all human knowledge. 40 years ago, books were on paper. Today, books are PDFs. All new information we produce is natively data. We've gone back and turned even all the old books and old knowledge into data. So we, for the first time, can actually feed all human knowledge to machines. That's part of the answer. But the other part really is computing power. This thing, right here. This changed the world. That's an H100. NVIDIA H100. Built by TSMC in Taiwan using technology built by ASML in the Netherlands. And this is the hardest thing to build in the world. There's nothing as hard as this. It's so hard, there's only one factory in the world which can make these. It's easier to put a man on the moon than to build one of these. And this here is what was used to teach DALL-E, Gemini, GPT, Claude, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, Unio, Pseudo, and all the other generative products and projects that we have today. It's a supercomputer. It's roughly this sized. And when you look at the largest data centers in the world, they have hundreds of thousands of these. Hundreds of thousands of H100s or H200s, which is the latest version, sitting in data centers run by companies like Meta or Microsoft, teaching the generative AI systems. And there's actually an interesting coincidence happening with the AI attacks. You see, deepfakes, where people's faces and voices can be cloned and stolen, clearly was problematic in the sense that you could make, for example, politicians say things that they didn't really say. But the likelihood that you could use a deepfake to scam individual employees inside an organization, for example, to move money around, that would have been hard to do 5 years ago, because 5 years ago, most companies were still operating only in the real world. If you would have a meeting, you would have a meeting in the real world. If you couldn't do a meeting in the real world, most likely you would make a phone call. But then the pandemic happened. And during the pandemic, we all got used to Zooms and Teams and Google Meets. That's now the norm. And when you combine the fact that more and more internal company meetings, including financial meetings, are happening with Zooms and Teams, and the fact that you can clone faces and voices of CFOs or CEOs or CTOs, we end up with a problem where it's more and more likely that attackers are using BEC scams and CEO scams to direct financial people in the organization to send the company's money to wrong places. The barriers for entry have completely collapsed. Attackers can now easily generate and clone the way we speak, the way we move, the way we interact, the sound of our voice. And this problem has only really started. We've only seen the very first attacks. It's clearly going to get more active. We've also seen the very first malware, which uses large language models to rewrite its own code. So every time this piece of malware known as LL Morpher, every time it replicates, every time it infects a new computer, it asks GPT to rewrite the code. It carries English language description of every function it carries inside of its own code. Then it has an API key and it asks the GPT servers to rewrite the code, which means it looks different every time, which makes it tricky to detect. How do you detect something that looks different every time? Now, I've had meetings with OpenAI to discuss what they can do about this. And there are things they can do. They can put in safety systems and alignment systems. They can put in guardrails. But those only work as long as someone doesn't remove the restrictions. And this brings us to a crucial dilemma. Should our AI systems be built on open source or closed source? I'm a big fan of open systems. I'm a big fan of open source. I love systems like Linux or Linux, built by a fellow Finn, Linus Torvalds, 30 years ago, which is by far the most common operating system on the planet today. In fact, it's also the most common operating system on Mars right now, which is pretty cool. So I like open source. Open source changed the world. The fact that the developers can work together on the same project regardless of companies or countries or geography, that's great, that's really empowering. But I also believe that there are limits to open source. And if there are limits to open source, generative AI might be where the limits are. You see, these companies building generative AI systems put in safety and security restrictions. They put in guardrails. But if you can download the system, you can just remove all of this. So you might have restrictions which prevents generative AI from writing phishing emails. And then it won't write phishing emails. But if you can download the whole system, you can just remove that restriction and then it will do anything. Same thing applies to image generators. Image generators won't make all kinds of images, including that they will not make X-rated images. But if it's an open source system, you can just download the code, remove the restriction, and create whatever you want. And this is the core problem between generative AI coming from open source or closed source. Like I said, if there are limits to open source, they might be here with these systems because they are simply too powerful if the attackers can just download the source code and remove all the safety and security precautions. Technology revolutions change the world. Nothing changes our world as much and as quickly as technology revolutions do. This has been the norm with electricity revolution, with the internet revolution, with the mobile revolution, and now with the AI revolution. And we don't just get to pick up the upsides, we will get the downsides, whether we like them or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikko. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan sekali lagi untuk Mikko Hypponen. Thank you so much. We will continue as we promised before. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start our rare opportunity to experience the endgame conversation live on stage. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan dong. Woo! The endgame session hosted by Mr. Gita Wiryawan featuring Mr. Mikko Hypponen will delve into the topic of artificial evil and future of fraud prevention. So are you guys ready? If you are, once again, everyone, could we hear a big round of applause for this endgame conversation live on stage? And here is Mr. Gita Wiryawan. Sekali lagi boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Let's enjoy this session.
Terima kasih. I want to take this opportunity to thank VIDA and its partners for inviting me to be here and to be on the same stage with Mikko. Mikko, it's a real honor. Let's start off with the incident that took place a long time ago involving a floppy disk. But before this particular incident, this would have been another incident that involved a floppy disk with the name Phantom, which would have been the first malware that took place on a floppy disk. Later on, you got involved in some sort of a soup with respect to a floppy disk incident in 1991. Tell us.
Sure, thank you. In 1991, I was a fresh programmer. I was still studying in university, and I was doing a big project for a big client during my part-time job that I was using to get some money on the side. The project was late. The CIO of the company I was writing the project for was a pretty tough guy. He was really mad at me for the project being late. So he called me up and said, come over tomorrow and just show how far along the project is. I was writing this database for them. I said, sure, I'll come over. I'll do a demo to you. And of course, since the project was late, I worked all night and I finished almost everything in the program. I had things to demo. So then I packed my stuff. I was at our office in Helsinki. I hop on a tram. I take the ride to the client. We go to a meeting room. I open up my briefcase only to realize that the floppy disk, which had the program I was supposed to demo, was still inside the computer at the office. I forgot to take the floppy with me. And now the client's boss was furious. He was confident that I had no program to show at all. I'm only stalling. This is a cover story. He was mad. And he was shouting to me that, we'll wait here in the meeting room. You go, Mikko. Mikko, you go and get the floppy and we wait. And I told him, yeah, sure, no problem. I have the program. Let me get the floppy. But it's going to take 2 hours. I have to take the tram to the other side of the city and come back. So he handed me his car keys to his brand new car. Take my car, get the floppy. So I take the car. I'm 21 years old. I'm a little bit nervous. I get on the streets of Helsinki and I crash his car. And I remember thinking that, I will never recover from this. Like, how on earth could I ever recover from this? And when I told the story to online on Twitter a couple of years ago, this lady told me that, hey, holy hell, Mikko, how did you ever get another job after that? And it was really nice to tell her that actually I didn't, because 33 years ago I was already employed by the company where I work today. I never got another job.
Well done. Congrats. Give him a big hand. Well, now that you've maintained your job there since for the last 33 years, I want to draw the picture. We have kind of shifted from a very much unipolar world order to a very much more multipolar world order. Given that status, the multipolarity, there's inevitably much higher proliferation of risk as they relate to cyber, nuclear, and climate change. Given the proliferation of risks that's so much rising and fast rising, how do you see the world going forward in terms of our ability to manage or mitigate risks as they relate to cyber? And I want to complicate this a little bit more. If we take a look at the global spending by all 193 countries in the world in terms of their defense budgets, the total spend on defense on an annual basis is about $2.75 trillion, of which the United States, NATO, and their friends and relatives spend about $2.15 trillion. Doesn't that bode well for only certain countries, but not so well for many others from the perspective of cyber?
Indeed it does. And like I've mentioned many times to different audiences, we are becoming more and more reliant on every new technology that we build. Same thing happened with electricity, happened with connectivity, and it's going to happen with AI. The fact that our societies run on computers make them very susceptible to attacks. Cyber attacks can disable whole societies. We wouldn't be able to keep our societies running if we are under a major cyber attack. So, from my point of view, spending on defense, that's completely justifiable. I live 2 hours away from the Russian border. Finland has a very large neighbor right next door. We fought them before. Both my grandfathers fought the Russians in the Second World War. So I understand the need for security very well. And of course, physical security is a very big part of that. But cybersecurity is really the growing area where we need to focus on how do we keep the reels rolling even when we are under attack. And today, all militaries build capabilities not just for defending themselves, but also for offensive attacks. Today, governments use offensive cyber power mainly for espionage, but also for sabotage. And when sabotage happens during wartime, then we don't call it sabotage anymore, then we call it cyber war. And that's a very real thing. We have plenty of examples, for example, in Ukraine right now, how cyber war can shut down very real parts of our societies.
Let's pick up on this. You've alluded to in the past a few times that 98% of malware crimes are actually done by organized crimes, whereas the remaining 2% are undertaken by extremist hackers and nation states. So it sounds to me like cybercrime is a privatized endeavor, right? And we've had so much peace and stability in the last few decades in the context of a nuclear proliferation because nuclear has always been under the control of nation states. Mm-hmm. But now with respect to cyber, which is very much more in the control of the private space, how do you expect humanity and the world to be able to mitigate this kind of risk?
That's a very good observation. When we think about the most powerful weapons or attack tools in the real world, the most powerful weapons are only in the hands of governments and militaries. I mean, even the most powerful organized crime gangs of the real world, they don't control aircraft carriers or nuclear weapons. Only militaries have those. But if we make a comparison to the cyber side, then that disappears. Even the most powerful, most advanced cyber weapons are also in the hands of private attackers or organized crime groups. And the problem really is that you can clone a cyber weapon. All you need to do is to see what it looks like. You can make 1 million copies. There's no limits to digital copying. And this really changes the nature of cyber weapons. We have very little visibility into the offensive capability of different countries, which means that cyber weapons have no or almost no deterrence value. The part, or maybe the biggest part or biggest value of traditional weapons is just having them and showing them. That brings you deterrence. Nobody wants to fight you if they see all the weapons you have. Prime example being nuclear weapons. But in cyber, this doesn't work. I mean, nobody really knows what the offensive capability you have is. And you can't really show it, because if you really show your offensive capabilities, then your enemies can copy your capabilities. And this ends up in a situation where all the investment done to build offensive capability brings no other value than the actual value of using these weapons. And that's not a very good scenario at all.
The last bit on the geopolitical stuff as it relates to cyber, if we take a look at the fiscal space of the world, on a relative basis, it's actually declining. Take a look at the tax ratios of most countries around the world, developed, developing, and underdeveloped. They're actually declining, which suggests that the ability for nation states to mitigate risks as they relate to anything would be declining by way of intuition, right? So the only way out to better manage risks on cyber is to actually tap into private money. Unfortunately, there are regions in the world which have not been able to attract capital formation as well as perhaps some of the developed economies. So inevitably, this exposes many of us in Africa, many of us in Asia, many of us in South America to greater vulnerabilities. So what lessons or what message do you have for these guys that are not blessed with money supply as much as some of the more developed economies?
One of the biggest challenges we have in securing the more developing part of the world is how do we get rid of legacy? Legacy systems, old computer systems, are one of the toughest challenges we have for cybersecurity, because when you have old and outdated systems, you can't update them anymore, which means they remain vulnerable to old and known attacks. And you cannot defend a system that you cannot update or patch. But when we look at global statistics, when we look at what kind of systems are in use, we see that plenty of old and outdated versions of operating systems or mobile phones or routers are in use in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in South America, which makes it almost hopeless to try to defend these systems. I had a really eye-opening discussion about this with the previous president of Estonia. Estonia became independent from Soviet Union in the early 1990s, and they had shortage of everything. You know, it was a very poor country at the time. We're the neighboring country, and amongst other things we were doing to help them out was that the city of Helsinki wanted to donate our old phone switch, central phone switch system, a digital system, because they had an old analog system where you would still use cables to connect phone calls, which seemed like a nice thing to do. But actually, the president intervened at the very last stage and used a veto to downvote that, no, we're not going to take that. And the justification was that, you know, we're a poor country, we can't afford to use, we can't afford to buy new technology, but even more, we can't afford to take old technology. The system we would have given for free was a decade old. It would have been outdated much sooner than anything recent. And there's a great wisdom right there. You really have to choose carefully where you invest your money when you have limited resources.
You've talked about these organized crimes as if they're like the typical corporations. They could fall into the category of being a unicorn. They could fall into the category of being a decacorn by way of their ability to monetize. Talk a little bit about their human capital recruitment.
We know quite a bit about the daily operations of the largest cybercrime gangs in the world. This information typically comes from monitoring work or infiltration work done by security companies like ours, or from insider leaks. Some of the largest organized crime groups like Conti have disbanded, and their internal documentation, including their intranet and their internal emails, have been leaked. And they really do have intranets, just like real companies have intranets. These are organized crime gangs. They have a structure, they have leadership, they have budgets, they pay salaries to their employees, they have HR departments to recruit new employees, they have lawyers working for them. Ransomware gangs have business analysts working for the gangs, where their main task is when a new victim is hit, the gang steals financial information from the victim, included with all the other files they steal. Then they give the bookkeeping information to their own business analyst, who will come up with a figure, like this victim can pay us this amount of money tomorrow. We know because we have their financial figures. So they really operate in a smart way, like a smart company would. And if we look at their figures, like how much employees do they have? What's the growth rate? What's their revenue? What's their profit? If that would be a company, many of these would definitely be considered to be unicorns. Now, of course, then they will never do an IPO. These are not real companies, but it's a good way of thinking about just how large they've become, how large and powerful the largest cybercrime gangs have become.
Presumably, they also have a pension plan for their employees.
I don't know about that. I think they don't.
Now, if for somebody that's graduating from the top university in Helsinki, or from Caltech, or from MIT, what would make him or her pivot from deciding as to join Google to joining an organized crime like this? Would it be morality driven or just strictly monetary value driven?
Most of the people that we know that have switched sides and gone to the dark side are not graduating from Caltech or Helsinki University. It's mostly people coming from more developing countries. That's why we see a lot of cybercrime gangs coming out from Russia. Right now we see a big growth in cybercrime gangs coming, for example, from Vietnam. We have a big problem with different kinds of fraud orchestrated from Africa. So when you have people with technical skills, who have the skills, but who might not have the same opportunities, that's the combination where you see these kind of groups thrive. We have seen cybercrime gangs recruiting for more skillful people by using cover stories. So for example, 2 years ago, we found a Swiss company operating from Geneva hiring penetration testers. Come and work for us. We have clients who have asked us to find vulnerabilities from their network, fully remote positions with basically double the pay that normal companies would pay for the same job. This company turned out to be a front for a cybercrime gang. They had set up a fake company for the purpose of hiring real, legit penetration testers who would really believe they're working for a company when they were really working for an organized crime group. They would be given missions that, your task this week is to find vulnerabilities from this client's network. The only problem is that that client had never ordered an audit. They had never ordered a penetration test. But of course, the engineer doing the test would have no idea. He would just find vulnerabilities, write a report, then the gang would use these vulnerabilities to break in.
You were a resource in the movie about the bank heist, right? I have two questions with respect to your commentary in that movie. The first would have been, what could the banking system do to prevent that stuff from happening again? And the second would be with respect to, what would your views be with respect to the prospect of a non-fiat currency going forward?
So the movie, $1 Billion Heist, tells the story of North Korean governmental hackers hacking into Bangladeshi central bank, trying to steal $900 million in order to fund the North Korean nuclear arms program. They succeed in stealing $81 million, so they only got less than 1/10 of what they could have gotten because of mistakes they made, but still, $81 million is still a sizable amount of money to steal. And the target they were hitting was a national central bank of Bangladesh. They were using various different technical means to move the money. Most of the movements were done through the SWIFT international network. But I guess the main lesson to learn, like what really went wrong here, is the attitude. People working in traditional cybersecurity for many years have thought that our job is to keep the attackers out. Just build enough fences and firewalls and different kinds of routers to filter out the traffic to keep the attackers out. Just keep them out. That's your job. Well, turns out if the attackers are persistent enough, good enough, they will always get in. And if your whole mindset as a defender is to keep them out, you refuse to accept the scenario that they would be in your network. And that's exactly the scenario we should be thinking about. We should be assuming that no matter what we do, the attackers will get in anyway. And then the question becomes, how do we detect that they are in? How do we detect a breach? How do we detect a breach so we can react to the breach? And that's what was missing in Bangladeshi Bank. They had put off a lot of money to defend their network. But once the attackers found a way in, they didn't see them inside the network at all, because they were assuming nobody could get in. So we should assume that we're going to fail, and then plan accordingly. Assume that the attackers will get in, then plan how do you detect that they are in your network, and what will you do then? And the question you said about fiat currencies is a great question, because the money stolen here was actually US dollars. Bangladeshi Bank's US dollar reserve was the one depleted by North Korean governmental attackers. There's two kinds of money in the world. Traditional money, fiat money, change math. You cannot regulate math. You cannot pass laws which change math. And this is the prime reason why cryptocurrencies, as long as you stay within the cryptocurrency system, are completely outside of the control of governments. You can't change the way these currencies work. They cannot be regulated. The only thing you can regulate is the intersect or transactions from cryptocurrency to real world currency. And that's exactly the reason why governments like North Korea, which are under the heaviest sanctions in the world, love cryptocurrency. They know they can move it around.
Just to pick up on that, how do you reduce the temptation for anybody to think that fiat, given the fact that it's non-mathematical, just seems less favorable to Bitcoin that is purely mathematical? Because just being intuitive about this, the fact that crypto, or more precisely Bitcoin, is mathematical, it seems to lead up to a higher degree of purity, if not sovereignty, for the individual, whereas the other just seems less so. How do you defeat that potential argument?
Every technical innovation brings us upsides and downsides. The downside of cryptocurrency or blockchain innovations is the fact that there's no reversibility. If there's a transaction, it's gone. There's nothing you can do to reverse it. The other downside we get from these new technologies is actually a flip side of the privacy part. The sovereignty and the privacy of these kind of currencies is great, but it also means that you have to be your own bank. And not everybody can be their own bank. I mean, if you know what you're doing, if you're technically capable, if you understand the protocols, you're much safer and you're much more private than you could be by using traditional money. But if you're not technical, if you're not just a normal person, if you're a farmer, if you're a grandfather who's not technically inclined, you're probably less safe. Because how do you really make sure you have the technical safeguards to store your coins and your keys? And if they're stolen, there's nobody you could complain to. So it's always a trade-off. We get benefits, but we get downsides as well.
Let's talk about GDPR. It seems like a great framework, but at the same time, it seems like an indication of the fact that Europe has not been a great beneficiary of the digital revolution, as a result of which it can afford to be much more strict about what to do with respect to the digital world. Given the fact that Indonesia is sort of copycatting the GDPR model, does that also mean that perhaps Indonesia has not been and is not likely to be a beneficiary or a big beneficiary of the digital revolution?
I'm not a big fan of regulation in general, but I do give credit to the GDPR regulation for privacy. Without that regulation, we would still be living in a world where companies would have data breaches, they would lose your information, and they wouldn't need to tell you. That's the world where we were living 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Today, inside Europe, and now increasingly elsewhere in the world, definitely here in Southeast Asia, South Africa just passed a law which is basically identical to GDPR in EU. California has privacy laws which are directly based on GDPR. And that really is changing the world. But there's tons of regulation which I don't think is beneficiary or beneficial to privacy or security. For example, the cookie law. which has been in effect for 8 years now in Europe, which basically warns you every time you go to a website that it's collecting information about your browsing. Duh, yeah, so what's the option? I mean, I want to use this site. So the main problem really about Europe not being competitive with the United States, I don't think it's just the regulation or that the regulation is directly in response to this. It's a fragmented market. Europe is much larger than the United States in the amount of people we have or GDP or internet users, but it's almost invisible when it comes to technology companies. As we know, the largest technology companies in the world come from the United States and now increasingly from mainland China. And of course, it should be more balanced, but it seems to be very hard to break this balance. And right now, the biggest crisis here seems to be that US companies and citizens seem to be having some kind of meltdown when they realize that now the largest apps in the world are no longer coming just from the United States. So some of them actually are coming from China. And they clearly don't like that at all.
There's this debate about there's a lot of corporations out here that are thinking about how they can do better in managing risks, right? Tell us your views about which are a bigger factor, insiders or outsiders? Given the fact that many malwares have been sort of like insinuated or triggered by insiders, but you've also seen so many outsiders that have been causing damage to the world. How do you see the two?
Yeah, I often hear the claim in newspapers and everywhere that, you know, the insider threat is the biggest threat, and I disagree. It is a very real threat, and when you get hit by an insider, a disgruntled employee or someone who wants revenge or who's an insider to spy for a competitor, of course that is very bad because the insider has the knowledge to do the worst things possible. But those cases are still relatively rare when we compare them to the average everyday run-of-the-mill attacks, whether it's ransomware or denial of service attacks or CEO scams, because the scale of these attacks is just massive. These large organized crime groups are hitting targets left and right. I often use the comparison that when ransomware groups find their victims, it's like they would be shooting at the internet with a shotgun, hitting random targets. And you easily see this when you look at the listings of the victim companies on the leak sites of the largest ransomware gangs like Lockbit or Akira or RansomX or Snatch. These companies that have been hit by ransomware are everywhere around the planet from all possible areas. Private sector, private companies, public companies. The way these attackers pick their victims is in a way very democratic. They just go after companies which happen to have vulnerable servers, which means there's big companies, small companies, everywhere on the planet. So from my point of view, it's much, much more likely to get hit by an outsider just because of bad luck, just because you have an outdated server that can be used to hack you. But when insider attacks happen, then it's of course much more serious. They're just much more rare.
Tell us some of the names of some of these organized crime units that are badass out there.
Well, I mentioned Lockbit. Lockbit is the biggest right now. They've had their share of problems lately because there's been some law enforcement action against their sites. But Lockbit, Akira, RansomX, Quantum, Snatch are amongst the largest gangs operating in ransomware space right now. And these are examples of the cybercrime unicorns we discussed earlier. And they're all fairly public because they all run websites. The websites they run are not in the normal web. You won't find them by Googling. They're running in the Tor hidden service. But if you access Tor, it's easy to see what they're doing right now. They are very open about their attack mechanisms. And for the victims that don't pay the ransom, they will actually post their email archives and document archives for anybody to download from their websites. So it's actually fairly easy to track the activity of these gangs because they're so public. And this Tor network is another example of how every technological innovation has an upside or a downside. The Tor network was originally funded by United States Air Force to bring new technologies which could be used inside totalitarian states for people who need access to outside services or who want to organize against the government. But the very same tools can be used by crime groups to post information, because what Tor really does is that it takes away the information about where the actual server is. If there's a website in the normal web, law enforcement can always find where the server is. They can actually physically go to where it is, ask to shut it down, take copy of the server, investigate it. In Tor, they won't find where it is. You can't shut it down because you don't know where in the world it is. You can't get a copy of the server. You can't investigate it. That's what it does. And that's, once again, a great innovation and an awful innovation, depending on who's using it.
Let's talk about AI. The H100 GPU by NVIDIA is a cool thing. But what doesn't get mentioned whenever he talks about 10xing or 30xing the new GPU vis-a-vis the pre-existing GPU, what doesn't get mentioned is the energy requirement. When you 10x capacity, when you 30x capacity, you're going to need 30 times more energy. And I want to draw a picture. If we take a look at China, which has been the LeBron James when it comes to renewable energy, but they still built 43,000 megawatts worth of power using coal just last year. It just shows the kind of realism that China has embraced, because if they want to AI the crap out of themselves, similarly the US, they're going to have to figure out how they're going to energize this thing. And it seems very clear that they're going to have to rely on conventional wisdom in terms of the energy mix, without which they're not going to be able to power ahead with AI. Talk about that.
The growth in computing power is one of the biggest game changers during our lifetime. 20 years ago, the fastest computer in the world had roughly the same computing capability as the phone in your pocket. So this is a supercomputer. 20 years ago, this would have been the fastest supercomputer in the world. And supercomputers, I don't know if you've seen a supercomputer, but they are the size of this room. There are multiple truckloads of CPUs, GPUs, and network cards, and they typically use their own power generators. The third largest supercomputer in the world is actually in Finland. It's an EU joint project. And I think the best measure on how fast or how much power it uses is the fact that they use the excess heat from this supercomputer to heat an entire city in Finland. And Finland is pretty cold. So computing capability changes so that this thing, which used to be the size of this room and require its own power generator, now fits into your pocket, and it runs on a battery. So not only the computing capability, the processing power has exploded, but also the energy consumption has plummeted in the long run. Yes, the greatest and latest technologies, like the GPUs we use to teach generative AI systems, have immense power consumption. That's very true. You could say exactly the same thing about blockchain, also huge power consumption. But that's only problem as long as the power is generated with fossil fuels, like coal. That's a really bad situation. If we use solar power or nuclear power or power coming out from wind or waves to run these systems, then there is no downside. So it really becomes a question of how we generate the energy that we use. And frankly, if we just forget everything that we're doing today with energy creation and just look at where we are a tiny planet sitting right next to a massive ball of fire. It's a little bit weird that we have any lack of energy at all, isn't it? We just need better technology to capture a small fragment of the energy which is being sent to us every single day. I
want to put this in the context of Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is energized to the extent of about 400,000 megawatts of power, pre-existing power generation capabilities, most of which are not renewable. And if you take a look at most Southeast Asian countries, they're electrified at less than 1,300 kilowatt hour per capita. Singapore and Brunei being the absolute exception, they're at about 10,000 kilowatt hour per capita. And if you want to put AI in the equation for Southeast Asia, you got to take a look at Southeast Asia as a region that needs to be electrified at least at 6,000 kilowatt hour. So if you want to bring up all Southeast Asian countries to a level of 6,000 kilowatt hour per capita, we're talking about having to build another terawatt, which is 1 million megawatts. And if you want to build each one of those on a renewable basis, Southeast Asia is going to require about $2 to $3 trillion. We don't have that kind of money.
Right.
We're not going to be able to get that kind of money in the next 26 years. 2050 is the time when we're supposed to be modern and also renewable and net carbon emitting. I mean, zero emitting on a net basis. So how do you square the circles here? For a region like Southeast Asia that needs to get a lot more money than it's ever been, that needs to get modern so that it can embrace AI in a better way, and also be environmentally friendly.
Maybe the solution is to just accept the fact that geographically it might not make sense to build everything locally. It actually makes much more sense to build data centers in the parts of the world where you have free energy and where you don't need to worry about cooling. Good example would, for example, be countries like Iceland, which has thermal energy. There's no shortage of power at all because they have volcanoes in there, and it's up there close to North Pole, so cooling is built in. And thanks to global networks, thanks to the cloud, thanks to the internet, we can actually, like company headquartered right here in Jakarta, can have a data center in Iceland. I mean, the connectivity is there. We have fiber optic cables all the way through. There's no latency issues. So we don't need to build the energy into places where it doesn't exist if we have abundance of free energy somewhere else in the world. We just have to figure out how to actually implement this and to make sure we are building this in politically stable countries.
I just want to bring up the point that there needs to be a bit more realism with respect to the sustainability narrative. The renewables are procured at a cost of 15 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas the developing economies around the world, they can't afford more than 3 to 5 cents. Indonesia at 5 cents, much less the Nigerians, the Congolese, the Somalians, they can't afford any more than 3 cents. So until those 2 points that are so divergent meet, I think we're all exposed with not having enough money, not having enough purchasing power, being a lot more vulnerable to ransomware or malware. Right? That I think is the reality that we're going to have to get used to in the next 26 years until such time we're supposed to attain carbon neutrality. Right. Any views on that?
Well, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not easy. These are very hard problems, and they require very strong leadership, because this is really a leadership issue. We can't change geography. We can't change, the kind of nature we have around us and the resources we have. But we can build long-term plans on how to actually make things better, and technology is the way out. Technology is the thing which is changing the world, and the big benefits that we can reap from the existing resources we have can be exploited much better by having better technology.
I agree with you completely in that AI is going to be able to augment anybody's ability to detect and prevent anything that's bad that could happen to us. But on a more philosophical level, AI is some sort of a hallucination, right? Which is affected by hypnosis. And having spent some time in Silicon Valley in the last couple of years, I noticed that the hallucination has been affected by one particular hypnosis, as opposed to multidisciplinary hypnoses. And that hypnosis is technological. The narrative of AI has not been pushed forth in an adequately multidisciplinary manner to the extent that it should involve the economist, the spiritualist, the economist, the spiritualist, the culturalist, the sociologist, all those guys that would have come from different dimensions. Is there a risk, in your view, that if this thing were to get pushed in a rather unidisciplinary manner as opposed to multidisciplinary manner, that AI is going to turn out in a less benign manner?
It's very true that it seems that some of the most powerful men, because they're almost always men in the world, are technology leaders. You look at the Mark Zuckerbergs and Elon Musks of the world, and it is a bit worrying that so much power is in the hands of people who think about every problem that we need to be solving through technology lenses. I'm a technology fan. I love how the world is changing thanks to all these new things we are building, but clearly we need more viewpoints than just technology. And culture is changing as well. We used to think that only humans can make art, and it's a bit painful to see that is changing. And I can't really articulate why I hate the idea that machines could make better art than humans, but I do hate it. I can't explain why. What does it matter? But I do genuinely believe that eventually the best poets in the world will be machines. And when I say the best poets, I really mean best. Best in the sense that we would all agree that these poems here, written by machines, have more meaning, are deeper, are more touching than these poems made by humans. I think that's going to happen in the upcoming years. And I think it sucks. I don't like it at all, but I think it's going to happen. And let me add something on that. Of course, all of this creativity and all of this art that these machines are making is based on original art first done by humans. And more of the content that we have online today is made by large language models. So we are clearly entering a world where future generative AI systems are being taught with data made by current generative AI systems. So we're entering sort of like a loop. And this doesn't sound like a promising future. I mean, you could compare this to recycling toilet paper. You can recycle toilet paper, but only to a limit. And that's what's going to happen here as well.
I'm going to echo your words. How do you collect royalties for music created by AI?
I have no clue. And like we've seen, there's already trending songs on top 40 lists which are made completely by AI. Where the money goes, I have no idea.
We've got a couple of minutes left. What are some of your final messages for some of us, or many of us in Indonesia, in order to be more resilient, in order to be more anti-fragile in a context of cyber security or lack thereof?
I meet a lot of companies, and I've met a lot of companies here in the region. And when I speak with top management, with leadership teams, with board members, I often comfort them by opening up the fact that most companies survive, even if they are hit with some of the worst cyber attacks. There's surprisingly few cases of companies which have gone bankrupt or which would have folded even after a major cyber attack. So what I'm saying is that cyber attacks to companies are survivable. However, the employees, the top management, they typically don't survive. So it's quite typical that the CISO is let go, or CIO, CTO, even CEO is let go after a major cyber incident. And whenever I mention this, they are also always much more eager to listen to what I'm saying. That, you know, your company will survive, but you won't. And then they are eager to learn more.
As a follow-up, do we need to have Chief Worry Officer?
Not a bad idea. And in fact, one of the things that I know works in preparing companies for this problem is, well, first of all, to take it seriously. And I say that because I know that in many organizations, whether it's public sector or private sector, the top management doesn't feel that it's an expert in the field of cyber. And if you're not an expert in some field, you sort of naturally direct your attention away from it. I mean, they're experts in leadership or in finance or you know, a technology area. But cybersecurity, it's difficult, it's hard, which means companies typically only talk about it at the top level when there's been an incident or maybe it's in the news. And that's not good enough. It has to be a permanent topic on every large organization's leadership agenda. And companies must prepare, they must rehearse, they must have penetration tests to test how well they are secured, so they know where the weaknesses are, so they can put their limited resources in the right places, and then run rehearsals, what ifs, war games, tabletop exercises, because I can't tell you how many times I've done debriefings to companies which have been hit, and they only learned that, you know, we couldn't communicate during the crisis. We never realized that our email would be down. Or I tried making a call to my engineer and I realized that my phone book was empty because our AD servers had crashed and my phone book was empty and I didn't have the phone numbers anywhere. I couldn't call it. They never realized that this could happen. That's what you can realize before it happens by running tabletop exercises and testing your systems with professionals before anything bad happens for real.
Mikko, it's been a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Big hand, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mikko, and also Pak Gita Wiryawan. Boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan sekali lagi, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. And of course, we would like to invite Pak Niki dan juga Ibu Sati Raswanto to give token of appreciation, and then we will capture this rare moment. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, could you please put your hands together for Mikko Hypponen and also Bapak Gita Wiryawan. Thank you so much for all of those informations that you have given us, very informative. Dan nanti kita juga akan ajak semuanya untuk mungkin bisa nobar ya, nonton bareng Billion Dollar Race ya. Jadi mungkin bisa di host sama VIDA juga boleh. Kita akan nonton bareng mungkin. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, could you please put your hands together? Thank you so much. Terima kasih Bapak Gita Wiryawan. Thank you so much Mikko Hypponen. And also Pak Niki Luhur, Group CEO VIDA, and Sari Raswanto, Presiden VIDA. Terima kasih Ibu Sati, terima kasih Pak Niki. So ladies and gentlemen, we hope that you are still with us because we have a few more discussions later this afternoon. But, of course, we would like to invite to give his remarks on stage, everyone. Please put your hands together for Mr. Pandu Patria Syahrir, Chairman of Indonesia Fintech Associations, who will give his remarks. Kami persilakan.
Good evening, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know I'm the last speech before dinner, I think. It's very hard to follow the act before me. The last hour and a half, I think I've learned so much about cyber security. But it's actually, this is a topic that's very close to our heart. So, for those that don't know, AFTEC is an organization, a self-regulatory authority organization that work closely with OJK, focusing a lot on financial technology. And cybersecurity has been a very topical issue this past year, and more so the past 10 weeks. Actually, I have a speech prepared by the team, but I kind of will ignore it simply because what was said the past hour and a half really resonate well with me for the past 2 months, especially here in Jakarta. One of the things that I would applaud VIDA is to actually highlight and bringing in world-class experts such as Mikko to come here and speak very eloquently with respect to cyber security. In terms of cyber, I mean, this is personally has been a big focus of mine the last 2-3 months. I didn't know, my main time job is actually as an investor. I didn't know that we've been investing in cyber until the last 3 months, and we realized, oh my goodness, what a market and what an important thing to learn and understand. One of the things for all of you that are business practitioners, businessmen, or whether you are a regulator, I would say the next 12 months is going to be a very interesting year, given that it is a big transition year in the world today, both in the US, both in China, as well as here in our home country in Indonesia. What's happening geopolitically that was mentioned by Pak Gita before and by Mikko, it's absolutely true, right? Uncertainty is rising. The war will continue. And with that, the threat of cybersecurity will become more prevalent. And Indonesia is no exception. So one thing that, at least in today's closing remark that I want to highlight is for all of us to become more cognizant of the risk. One of the things that I hope from this past hour and a half, 2 hours that I've listened in is learn to be curious and be careful of what's happening within your organization. The threat of cyber is not just real. I think it is the threat of yesterday. It is a true business risk today. But for each one of us, myself included, present company included, we just have to be humble enough and be curious enough of how big the risk is for our businesses. So, thank you, VIDA, for highlighting the risks. Us and AFTEC are doing a big event, I think November 11, which is FinTech Week. It is the biggest such event of the kind in Southeast Asia. One of the big themes is on security and cybersecurity. So once again, I want to thank VIDA. I also wanted to thank the relevant organization that's here today. And I'm so glad that we have this event called WTF. So where's the fraud? So thank you and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Terima kasih Pak Pandu, mohon jangan kemana-mana. We would like to give token of appreciation, and for that we would like to invite Pak Niki to please come on stage to deliver token of appreciation to Mr. Pandu Patria Syarir, our chairman of the Indonesia FinTech Association. Of course, with your clap, kita iringin juga dengan tepuk tangan Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. As Pak Pandu said, and also Mikko, Pak Gita said, it's going to be interesting in the 12 months ahead. So what VIDA doing right now is some kind of preparing us more or less for the upcoming event or situation that will come in the 12 months ahead. So thank you so much. Once again, everyone, please put your hands together for Mr. Pandu Patria Syarir and also Pak Niki. Terima kasih. So, masih excited Bapak dan Ibu sekalian? Masih penuh dengan semangat? Kalau penuh dengan semangat, boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan untuk Anda semua yang masih hadir duduk manis di bangku Anda, siap untuk menerima informasi berikutnya. Oke, this next discussion juga amat sangat menarik. Our final forum session is talk about collaborative defense, insights from real world use cases. Dan sepertinya saya tanpa berlama-lama lagi akan segera mengundang yang akan memimpin panelis kita pada sore hari ini. Tapi masih dipersiapkan, oh ini kayaknya diskusinya akan panjang sekali ya, karena botol air minumnya kembali diisi penuh. Jadi untuk Bapak dan Ibu sekalian nggak usah khawatir ya, nanti kita juga akan ngobrol-ngobrol, kita akan networking after this. But kindly we ask you to stick around to listen to this very interesting discussion. As I mentioned before, it's about collaborative defense, insights from real world use cases. Dan untuk Bapak Ibu sekalian silakan saja nanti kalau misalnya ada pertanyaan-pertanyaan boleh ditulis, nanti mungkin setelah networking, acara networking ini bisa ditanyakan, Anda bisa approach ke narasumber kita yang sudah hadir pada sore hari ini to talk more about what we have discussed on this beautiful afternoon. So ladies and gentlemen, here it is. We're about to invite Ms. Sati Raswanto, our President VIDA, as she invites the distinguished panelists to come on stage. So everyone please put your hands together for Ms. Sati Raswanto. Sepertinya masih ada beberapa diskusi. Tapi senang sekali Bapak dan Ibu ya masih stay sampai dengan sore hari ini. Untuk Anda yang menikmati informasi yang dibagikan, untuk Anda yang merasa bahwa informasi yang dibagikan ini amat sangat berguna, boleh nggak saya dengar tepuk tangan sekali lagi untuk VIDA yang sudah menyelenggarakan this forum. Kita excited untuk apa yang akan ada atau terjadi di masa yang akan datang. Untuk itu kami mempersiapkan dengan sedemikian rupa dengan semua informasi yang bisa kita bagikan, salah satunya melalui diskusi yang akan disampaikan oleh Ms. Sati Raswanto, our President VIDA.
Thank you everyone. Okay, last push, right? How's everyone feeling? Good? Kalau tadi pagi kita bilang Chief Worry Officer, terjemahannya Chief Parno Officer, right? CPO, so we should have one, Nick. But yeah, it's a tough act to follow, as everybody knows, to have such two prominent people talking about very heavy topic. But fortunately, today I will be accompanied by some amazing individuals on this stage. All of them are very accomplished in their field by any standards. Some of them I have been fortunate enough to call friends. Please give a big round of applause for our panelists to close the day. Vince Iswara, CEO and co-founder of Dana. Budi Ganda Subata, Managing Director of Goto Financial. Mbak Daru S. Tiningrum, CEO of Honest Bank. And Mas Widi Nugroho, Digital and IT Director of Mandiri Taspen. You guys. All right. Thank you guys for coming today and closing our VIDA Executive Forum. So collectively, you guys represent probably the whole digital user base. Digital financial user base in the country, it's fair to say, right? And so when we talk about fraud, and we've been talking about fraud all day today, we gave some examples, you guys probably have seen it all, right? So maybe, especially for some of you who have been around for a while in the ecosystem and have seen the evolution. So maybe I want to start with you, Bud. What are some of the typical fraud stories that you have encountered over the years? And how has this evolved over time?
That's a tough question. Actually, there's a lot. I could go on for the next 2 days to talk about war stories about fraud, but I'll try to keep it brief. So for example, I think Goto Financial, I think one of the key marquee or the most popular product is GoPay. So on payment side, obviously payments fraud is the most obvious one. Credit card fraud, stolen credit card being used for fraudulent transaction, that's one. That's why, the industry started to introduce a lot of authentication like 3D Secure, and then you have risk-based authentication as well. Nowadays, you have account takeovers. So typically, people giving away their OTP and PIN so that their account is being compromised, and then after that, the funds are being cashed out. We also see scams, so not necessarily the funds that are being stored in their account that is being cashed out, but then because of scams that they're being redirected to their bank account and then do transactions that they didn't realize that the transaction is actually fraudulent transaction, and that money is being embezzled or washed somewhere in another ecosystem. We have also seen incentive abuse. So during the heyday of e-commerce, fintech, as well as tech companies where we pump in a lot of cashbacks. Unfortunately for us, the cashback didn't go to the end consumers, but it actually goes to fraudsters where they use that cashback to buy pulsa and prepaid vouchers. We have seen now when it comes to, again, topic of the day, digital identity, which I think we spoke about deepfakes earlier. People being onboarded into the ecosystem, identity theft, so we're seeing it. Hence, we see a lot of deepfakes being utilized for that identity theft, ID cards being utilized by somebody else so that they get access to payments and financial products, you name it. But it's not all doom and gloom, because luckily for us, the technology in terms of malicious activity is improving, but also the technology in terms of countering it is also improving. So that's why we're seeing a lot of spook detection, liveness check. I mean, credit card fraud, as I said earlier, we had a lot of 3D secures and risk-based authentication, but we're also seeing device fingerprinting, device ID, liveness checks, spoof detection, deepfake detection, you name it. And hopefully, I mean, the way I see it, it's like a cat and mouse game, right? Fraudsters are getting much more adept in technology, but hopefully in terms of, risk mitigation and, the CIOs, the CISOs, the CTOs, we're also getting better in countering frauds as well. So yeah, that's about it.
Okay, so Vince, obviously you're also in the wallet space, and we talked about this a lot where you said, we're only as strong as our weakest link. How do you observe that? How do you think about the fact that your user base obviously have different levels of understanding on what cybersecurity is, what keeping it safe, et cetera, et cetera? So.
Okay, I think the first thing is we have to realize that this is an interconnected world, right? When you talk about ecosystem, that means you already are within a network. And now, not only the ecosystem is within ecosystem interconnected, but the ecosystem itself, when you talk about it, it's now globally connected as well. So you have to be aware that the risk, it's no longer within certain area in a country, in a region, but it's actually global. The malicious parties, it can come from anywhere in the world. So that's one thing that we have to realize, that this is all interconnected. So the second thing is, that's always been the most difficult part, right? Because technology moves so fast. There is always now, every week, something new comes out. Especially with the large language model, the AI, the machine learning, there's an advancement that's not only impacting the way you work, but in fact, it's a paradigm shift of how things should work. And so all of this comes together, it's kind of scary, right? But at the same time, so we should also ask the, I would say, the company who have really wants to, like upscale the ecosystem, upscale the countries, convert people into this digital ecosystem. We should also think kind of the same way on how these malicious actors are doing it as well. We have to learn from each other. We have to keep building our network itself. It's no longer a one person or one party or one company that is actually doing everything by itself or themselves. It has to be all of us come together all of us actually work together and share to each other on how we can protect the ecosystem. So recently, we've been, and this is interesting, right? So if you talk about the technology community, the technologists love to share. There's a lot of engineers that actually, there's a forum, there's an event, they talk to each other, they share to each other, and then always improve their technology or the development skills, so that's why the technology is moving so fast. The marketing people, they network all the time. They socialize, they know each other, and then they share on what is the positive things on how to do marketing better. So the risk people, the risk and cybersecurity people, are usually the most, right? Non-social people in the company.
Best kept secret.
But that's the thing. So that's kind of sad, because right now, if you talk about it, they are the most important people to learn what's going on, what's happening in the world. So 2 weeks ago, I think about 3 weeks ago, we set out the first non-bank risk, including all the fintech, including the banks, risk forum. So then we hope, yes, supported by Kadin, guys. So if you want to join, please do. So we want to also start having this kind of a forum, so where all the risk, the cybersecurity, and come and start and sharing to each other, start learning from each other, especially if there's a new trend. Immediately they can communicate, so the whole ecosystem can understand. Yeah. So these are the kind of things that I believe it's important for us.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. And I think events like this is also an attempt to go there. Yeah. And so Mbak Daru and Mas Widi, both of you represent banks, but in very different ways. Right? So you have a more digital native user base. You have a more traditional retiree types of user base. How does this influence how you think about cybersecurity and securing your system? Maybe Mbak Daru first, and then Mas Widi.
So let me start. Thank you, Mbak Sati. We born and strategically decide to be a digital first. So we are not developing any human kind of interaction or face-to-face interaction. So we are the recent financial service provider, I would say. Dana and Goto Financial are initiating a long way back, and we recently came, but with the progress and the adoption of the technology that people have in Indonesia, we still see that the literacy in terms of not financial, the BI team are mentioning about the financial literacy, it's technology literacy in terms of the society in Indonesia is still diverse. And the only way to make the gap closer is actually by removing the factor that can make the user vulnerable. So that's why we choose digital only as a platform. That's one. Second, as a credit card player, we decide to remove all of the sensitive credential from the physical form. That's to enable a user not necessarily to understand what is the risk that they exposed to. And we make it secure by design in a way.
Oh, so secure by design. I like that as a tagline. Mas Widi, how do you think about your cybersecurity strategy given your user base?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd like to share something that is extremely different from these three guys here. Because as you know, our customers are mostly the pensioner, whereby maybe their average age are around 60 or 65, yeah. But of course, as a bank, we have to embrace the new digital things, yeah. So our biggest challenge now is, if we look at about the cybersecurity, normally we talk about the zero trust society. But what happened in the pensioner life, even they, actually now they practicing people trust society. So imagine, for example, even if they want to access to the bank services, they just simply give it the ATM card to the maybe their children or their somebody else, the home assistant, something like that, and even they give it the PIN. So you can imagine it's very contrast, yeah. So that's why we also need to introduce the new technology, how to make the easy access for them to enjoy the banking services, but at the same time to improve the security. And another thing is, let's say we talk about the mobile application today, because the channel now is, of course, going through the mobile. But imagine in the past, mobile phone, for example, we only consider mobile phone as maybe description. We never care how mobile phone in the future will be as important as today. So we also have the problem to make sure that the mobile phone now is getting more and more important for security purpose, because now for verification and for the security, of course we need the mobile phone. So that's some of the challenges that we have, but of course we have to improve it to catch up with the new technology.
Maybe as a follow-up question, Masbidi, before there was a comment made by Mikko around legacy systems. How should we think about, or how do you think about integrating these legacy systems with newer cybersecurity tools where you sit?
Yeah, of course, because we have to catch up with the new lifestyle now, because even sometimes with our subscriber or our users, officially the registered users is the pensioner, but on the internet or online world, nobody knows who is exactly the users. It could be the children or their, even their neighbors or something. So that's why we have to combine how the legacy system gradually, or even create the system that can also increase the security at the same time. So that's why I think the new technology like what we discussed today, it's very important to make sure that we are dealing with the same or the eligible people. It's quite common for the pensioner. We want to make sure that they're still alive, so they're eligible to get the pensioner salary. So that's why we do using the authentication mechanism, but we need to improve better and better, because especially if we deal with elderly people, of course we'd like to simplify all the process. Maybe even they don't know how to use the smartphone. So the challenge is how we create as simple as possible way for them to do the banking transaction.
So going back to Mas Budi, right? I think a lot of you are business leaders, and at the end of the day, there is a balance to be made between security and conversion and ease of use, right? We all know token is safe, but I always carry it around, but how many of us are carrying it around, right? And SMS OTP is not reliable and maybe not so safe. Where do we draw that line? How do you think about where you draw that line for your respective companies?
A very simplistic way of looking at it is if, let's say, you let fraud, again, for lack of a better term, if you let fraud happen, what is your level of tolerance in terms of losses? But on the flip side, when you sacrifice security, you get increased conversion, then that conversion results in revenue. So what's the cost-benefit analysis? So that's a very simplistic way of looking at it, right? But I mean, security.
How do you factor in the trust from your user? Yeah.
So because with security, right, it's like this peribahasa in bahasa Indonesia, right? Nila setitik rusak air susu sebelangga, right? All you need is just one incident, and then you eliminate the trust. So I think especially in a payments and financial industry, trust, security, safety is a must. And that's like the fundamental principle that we need to have, because trust is very hard to earn, but it's very easy to lose. So I think what we're trying to do is that, thankfully, with technology today, we are able to reduce some of the frictions while at the same time securing the platform and increase conversion. Because I think with data today, you can start creating user flows in order to make sure that, let's say, for example, if I give one example of user onboarding or KYC, right? Back then, remember the old days where, okay, this is pre-digital, right? You go to a teller and then they look at your KTP and look at you, make sure that the face is the same, right? And then after that, you're quote unquote verified. And then the next state of the evolution is that on certain platforms, you take a picture of yourself, your selfie, and you hold your ID card, and then you need to enter information, what have you, and then to make sure that all the information is verified. But with technology such as OCR, right, you are able to extract the information of that KTP, everything is pre-filled, and then make sure that the accuracy is above 90%, and then after that you send it to the Ministry of Homeland Affairs, Dukcapil in this case, and you get a verification. But then what about liveness check, making sure that human is indeed human without really testing or adding more frictions? Actually, Dana did a very good liveness check, because I remember when I used Dana, then it started prompting the user to blink, turn left, turn right, right? Which is basically also a way to show that human is indeed humans. But there are now depth detection to make sure that what is in front of you is indeed 3D. There is also spoof detection, deepfake detection, to make sure that human is indeed human and it's not a printed face in front of you. So there are ways in technology today that really reduces the friction, but at the same time also increasing security, and everything is happening on the background without actually the user realizing it, that everything is done for them. So it's all a matter of adopting the cutting edge technology, but again, as a key principle, trust, safety, security is a must and is a fundamental principle, and compliance, of course. Partly because I'm the head of compliance at VIDA Financial. Compliance is number one, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget your AML CFT principle, risk management principle, information security, as well as consumer protection. So that's it.
So everything that Budi said about anti-spoofing, et cetera, do drop by VIDA's booth, that's the plug, right? In order for you to see how this can work in your apps and
I can be your salesman,
yeah,
right?
Thank you, Bud. Mbak Daru, you're a digital native first, and that comes with its consequences, right, of not being able to leverage any of the physical infrastructure, right? So if you talk about this, balance, it's even more important for you, because actually in all the other cases, they have physical point to meet with the customer. Yeah. So where do you draw that boundary?
In a way that we are working in the digital only, we fully aware that attack is coming like every day. So two things, Mbak Sati. One is the discipline of acknowledging what goes wrong. Even things are going right, minor problems. So discipline on acknowledging what's going wrong. And second, discipline of not to be jumawa, I would say. Yeah. We have a fraud detection system, we have a good KYC process, we have a good this layer, that layer. But attacker will find the weakness spot, like what Vince mentioned. So not to let any open hole for the hackers, and that usually come down into the attitude of us who are in the company to humble enough to acknowledge, hey, there is a mistake, hey, there is a potential loophole that not yet be a problem, but potentially can be something in the future. So that's the preventive action that I would say we practice as a culture in the company. So apart, as much as we educating, increasing the technology literacy and the cyber risk that associated with financial instrument that we deliver to a customer, but also the technology side in the company itself. Yeah.
Thank you, Madaru. So I want to move to collaboration. I think everybody mentioned that we can't do it alone. There are like different initiatives. But businesses always hesitate to work together, particularly when you work with competitors, etc. Whereas this topic is something that we can actually work together for. Vincent, how do you think we can foster that better as an ecosystem? Because again, different types of technology, different types of user base, different types of mindset on how we should think about cybersecurity. Today there was a conversation that I had. It's like, oh, cybersecurity is not the issue of tomorrow. It's actually the issue of yesterday, and some people may not realize it. So how should we work together? How do you think about partnering with regulators, associations, your competitors, other players, other fintech players?
I think the first thing that you need to have is the mindset, right? We all have to understand that we want to protect the ecosystem together, right? And I think that's very important. You cannot protect your company only if the ecosystem is not surviving. So the first thing all of us have to realize is all of us have to come together and we need to protect the ecosystem. So how to protect the ecosystem if you're not doing the collaboration with each other? Because we're all interconnected. I mean, me and Budi, we're very good friends. Our company sometimes, the market take a look at it as competition sometimes, but I don't believe so. But we are interconnected. There's people that using Dana that is actually transferring money to GoPay, people using GoPay transferring money to Dana, and then also topping up through Mandiri, and also using the Honest card to actually pre-fund the balance or as a source of fund. So we're all connected. So the first thing we all have to realize is since we're all connected, we all have to work together. And this is such an important market. Indonesia is actually one of the fastest in terms of converting to a digital financial ecosystem. In fact, the World Bank has stated that Indonesia is the fastest in the world compared to any other country. It is. So, and such an opportunity, especially for the Indonesian Golden 2045, which is coming up, right? Which is all the bonus demographic and everything. And then especially for us, the intent is to increase the GDP per capita growth as much as possible. All of this is actually pretty much going to be derailed if we don't put focus on the cybersecurity. And once again, right, anyone can have the best, product, the best technology, the best system, the best risk management, the best compliance, but you have to understand the malicious actors, they are actually also have all of these best equipments and also best people, talents, right? People are just talking about it and they're global. So we don't keep this ecosystem together, we don't work together, we're not gonna survive. And with that mindset, we all have to be able to work together.
So, Mas Widi, I'm passing this on to you because I think as a lot of the digital native and digital ecosystem players are a bit more open to collaboration than perhaps some of the bigger traditional banks.
Yeah.
Do you agree or not to that statement?
I couldn't agree more. What Vincent mentioned actually, because all of us here actually have the responsibility to manage other people's money. So imagine if we don't get the trust from our customer, so all the industry will collapse. And I think the collaboration, especially if we know that every single day we have the new threat coming, so we cannot work alone. For example, in my case, it's very important. As I mentioned previously, every pensioner, every month they have to do the authentication. Why? Because Google, the reason is because they just want to know whether the person is still alive or not. But actually Google now, no maybe, we thought ask them to do the authentication. So we can imagine if we can work collaboration. So if we know that yesterday they do the transaction in Dana, for example, so we can be assured that that people are still alive, for example, like that. Or even in our case, our biggest risk is if the lender, they pass away, for example. Yeah. So how do we create the credit scoring, for example, to make sure that they are eligible to get the lending by collaborating the data that we have. So we can have, for example, with GoPay, for example, with the UMKM, if they have the eligibility to get more funding, then it will be easier for us to get the credit scoring better. So those kind of collaboration, I think, is open to do, to implement. Thank you.
Okay, so after this, we create something together, right?
For sure.
Okay, so I see the clock. So maybe this is the last question that everybody can think about. So if we're sitting here, let's say in a year's time, talking about the topic of cybersecurity and collaboration in cybersecurity, what is one hope that you would be able to say to the audience in terms of where we are by then as an ecosystem?
I'll take a crack. I think what I hope a year from now is that we're still talking about the same topic, from a sense that I think the level of awareness and the level of vigilance needs to remain high, and that people don't get jumawa or complacent. The fact that, hey, I can detect deepfakes today, right? And then next year, probably there's another thing that happened. Probably AI has become even more powerful, that it's getting more difficult to detect. But I think a year from now, I hope we still have the same conversation. But then at the same time, I think the whole collaboration in terms of having things like a centralized database, for example, or blacklist, or even informal discussion that even today that we already have, and that conversation is even more intensified. That's my hope, so that the level of awareness is not only restricted to us today in this room at this moment in time, but also to our friends. Again, not saying that the regulators don't aware, they are aware, they are on top of things, but we keep having the same conversation with regulators, we keep having the same conversation with banks, we keep having the same conversation with my mother, with my mother-in-law, with my father-in-law, who, for the love of God, they don't install GoPay today because they say it's too difficult, but I want them to install GoPay so that they can understand that, hey, there's also digital risk that they need to be vigilant on.
Thank you, Bud. Who wants to take a crack next?
Maybe I will take the next one. So what I imagine is that the attack will always happen, right? But I'm imagining of our user is understand, okay, I took this and I know the loop is here. So they are not easily bait by emotional factor on social engineering. They are not easily attracted by easy money, easy cashback. Anything that too easy is usually too good to be true. I don't like it, but that's reality.
Thank you, Mbak Daru. Mas Widi, Vincent? Mas Widi?
Yeah, I think I'd like to emphasize on the collaboration, as our topic that we choose today. Because I come from the telco background a couple of years ago. We experience how, for example, SMS, they grow very, very well when we did the interconnection. And today, as mentioned by BI in this previous session, how we can see the QR payment has been significantly growing dramatically, even maybe one of the best in the world, yeah, Vincent. So I think once we can have the collaboration and interconnected world, especially in the payment sector, all of us can grow together in the payment industry or in the banking industry, something like that. So also specific for the cyber security or cyber threat, I think there has been many initiatives, how we can have a collaborative effort to identify, to cope with the incident, something like that. So if we can collaborate with this threat from many parts of the world, then we can be stronger. That's my ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try
Thank
to.
you, Mas Widi.
I'll try to have a wonderful statement. So I do hope 1 year from now, we're all going to be united in fighting this together. And if all of us is fighting this together, imagine any malicious actor in the world will be scared. Honestly.
And they will attack somewhere else.
Honestly, but that's the key here, guys. If all of us are united to fight this together, every single participant in the ecosystem, who actually want to attack? It will be very difficult. Yeah. So I hope that's the case.
Okay. Thank you. Let's give a big round of applause to our panelists today. Thank you for the insight. Thank you for your support to VIDA. Please keep on using us in your services. That's the plug. And thank you very much, everyone, for staying here. I know it's late. I know we're here late. So I'm going to pass it back on to the MC.
Yes, boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan. Terima kasih sekali Ibu Sati for leading us this panel. And we're about to take a group photo and also give away the token of appreciation. Thank you so much. Terima kasih Bapak Budi. Terima kasih Bapak Vince, Mbak Daru, dan juga Pak Widi. Terima kasih sekali. Pak Niki, please be kind to join us on stage. That was a very interesting discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Tadi menarik sekali apa yang sudah dibagikan, karena apa yang dibagikan itu adalah apa yang terjadi dengan kita on a daily basis. Jadi sekali lagi boleh kita berikan tepuk tangan untuk diskusi yang tadi sudah disampaikan. Terima kasih Bapak Budi Ganda Subrata, Vince Inswara, Daru STD Group, dan juga Bapak Widi Nugroho. Thank you so much juga untuk Pak Niki dan juga Ibu Sati Raswanto. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking around, but we hope that you still enjoying this gathering, this forum. And right now we are inviting each and every one of you to please join us for our networking drinks and also a product demo session. And then we encourage each and every one of you to please visit the booth and take this opportunity to engage with our fellow industry leaders. We would like to remind you that we will host a networking dinner later in the afternoon, and your attendance will be incredibly influential. So everyone, please put your hands together for VIDA. Thank you so much for being here. Stick around and then be part of this discussion. It's been a very interesting afternoon. Please stick around for our networking drinks. And thank you once again for all of your participation and contribution today. We hope that you found this session insightful and valuable. Enjoy the evening, and then we look forward to seeing you at the future events. Don't forget, we will have networking dinner with Mikko Hypponen. So we'll see you at our networking drinks and our networking dinner. Enjoy, everyone. Thank you very much.